What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the show. We are your hosts, Chase and Myles, and we are at the Lucky Duck. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special episode. Myles, please introduce our next guest.
Hey, folks. Today's episode is brought to you by ChatGPT. You ever found yourself staring at a blank screen, wondering how to write the perfect intro for your podcast? ChatGPT's got your back. They've got award-winning AI that will take the job off your hands. Thanks, ChatGPT. They're taking our jobs. Anyway, let's get back to the guest today. Brett, a commercial airline pilot who, by the way, has a hot take that's just too good to ignore. He's convinced that pretzels should be banned from all in-flight snack options because they're too dang dry and should just make everyone thirsty. I mean, who knew a pilot could be so controversial? Well, dig into that, and of course, we're going to talk about his life flying planes way up in the sky. Ding! Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a fun one.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Wow, what an intro.
I tell you what, that caught me off guard.
It always does.
Thanks, ChatGPT. I couldn't even tell that they wrote it for you.
Yeah, it's pretty nice, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's why everybody obviously orders seltzer water.
Exactly.
Except for the weirdo who gets tomato juice.
Exactly. Speaking of drinks, cheers. Hey, thanks for being on the show, man.
Thank you for
This is gonna be fun.
making this and having me, and it worked out because I was on my way home actually from a work trip, and you're on the way. So sweet. I'm excited to be here.
You get to call every work a work trip because you're a pilot, right?
Of course.
Yeah, so that's the way it works. You're traveling all full time.
Although my family always rejects my statement of a work trip. They're like, you're on vacation, which is sometimes true.
Yeah. It's so how long have you been a pilot now?
That's a funny question because some people at United ask me, and I'm like, well, I've been here for 2 years, but I've actually been flying for 10. So
That's a long time.
oh, yeah, I guess I graduated in 2015 from flight school. So yeah, it's almost exactly 10 years now.
Dang. And so United Airlines, huh? That's who you hold your hat on?
Yeah, and it's funny. That's also funny because people are like, well, do you think you're going to stay here? And maybe some people don't know, but that is typically major airlines is a place you're going to stay for the rest of your career. So yeah, I've been here for 2 years, and it's kind of interesting too because I never really had any airline aspirations. Some people in aviation are like, I want to work for Delta, American, United, and I want to fly their biggest airplane or something like that. And honestly, it wasn't really an aspiration. I was just flying private charter up until about 2.5 years ago, and was having a good time doing that, building some good experience, going to some cool places. But here I am. I'm happy to be at United.
Nice. What so you have to in order to become a commercial airline pilot, you have to do X amount of flying time, like flying hours, is that right? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so it's definitely flight time based. You can go honestly into the military, you can go to college, which is what I did. So I would say there's at least one college in every state that has a flight program. So I went to Bowling Green in Ohio. A lot of people ask if it was Kentucky. And
yeah, that's right. I once had to emergency land in Bowling Green, Kentucky. When I was on a really, really small private jet, but it was like the smallest airport in Bowling Green.
Yeah.
Trying to go to Nashville, and they had to divert because of weather or something. Really cool.
Those things do happen. So yeah, you can go to college, you can go to the military, you can honestly, some people I've known would go get a business degree or some other type of degree that's not related to aviation, and they'll go get flight training on the side. Some reasons I've heard for doing that is it's a backup if something happens with your aviation career. You don't have a degree in aviation, so you can always backtrack to business or whatever else it was. So yeah, you basically go to school, you kind of get your private pilot license, your instrument rating, your commercial pilot license, a multi-engine rating. And then after that, a lot of people become instructors. It's not mandatory, but it's a good way to build flight time and really hash down the skills that you built in your training. And not necessarily those steps don't all happen in the exact order. I just listed them. So you kind of build your flight time and kind of network, and you can work. There's honestly a lot of random jobs out there that people have before they go into an airline, if that's their goal. But generally, it used to be, 1,500 hours is what they required to get into an airline. That number fluctuates with the market. If there's a big hiring demand like there has been in the last 2 years, they can lower numbers, not usually less than 1,500, but like I heard, for example, United, to get into a major, you had to have like 3,500 hours, and you had to be, like people weren't getting hired until they were like 35 years old. And for context, I got hired, I want to say probably around like 2,500, 2,700 hours, and I'm 31, so I got hired at like 29.
Wow.
So
it's a solid 8 years of flying in order to get to that level, it sounds like.
yeah,
Right.
that's just market based, honestly.
Yeah.
Like there's guys that, I fly with now, and they're like, man, it took me much longer to get where you are. But yeah, just market based.
So they had a lot of hiring in the past few years. So they were kind of looking at who has experience and then who's applying, and just taking the people with the most experience who are flying, even though it was under the kind of typical threshold from before.
Generally speaking, yeah. I mean, the hiring team definitely, when they get your application, they're going to consider what type of experience it is, not just how many hours you have. It does matter what those hours, what you were doing to build that flight time. So to give you a short example, what that could be, I mean, literally banner towing. If anybody's ever seen banners being pulled by airplanes, that's a way to build flight time. Flying skydivers, you can do that. Let's see, crop dusting. I mean, some of these are much less common. I would say for airline pilots, a lot of people, it's either military or they were a flight instructor. So some of those odds and ends jobs are less common. Me, for example, right out of college, I got lucky, I guess. I mean, this company that was nearby, about an hour away, is a family-owned company. They sent a request basically to the flight school because they had to close. I guess they've had close ties for a while. So they said, "Hey, we're looking for somebody to come up for a summer internship," and I guess our chief pilot at the flight school sent it out to like 5 people that she felt knew were about to graduate and felt qualified. And I just jumped on it the night I got it, and luckily got in with that family company. So it was a summer internship though. So I was there for 3 months basically. And the flight part of it was to build flight time was, hey, you can do airplane rides. It was a scenic area up in on Lake Erie, Port Clinton. Some people know, like if people know where Cedar Point is, it's in that area. So it was like, yeah, you can do airplane rides because people came up to do that and check out the islands. But, I wasn't really flying that much there. I was basically spent a lot of my time on what's that thing called, a creeper or whatever that you lay on your back on, you know what I'm talking about? Or,
Yeah.
I forget what they're called.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
But like I spent my time under airplanes cleaning grease off the bellies. So,
Wow.
and I just came out of college and I'm like, okay, I feel fortunate to be around airplanes, but I need to fly them. Like that's what I just spent a lot of money on.
Yeah.
So eventually I found a different part-time flight instruction job. And then toward the end of the 3 months, I told the father and son who ran that company that, hey, listen guys, I've gained some good experience, but I got to go fly. I guess I'm already rambling about this.
No, it's gum.
So you had to spread your wings, jump out of the nest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like,
wet.
the whole point of this is building my flight time. So I went to the family and told them, like, appreciate it, I'm out though. And they said, hey, and it was like I don't know, a couple days went by and they came back and they said, hey, make sure you stop and talk to us before you leave today. I was like, this, okay. And they said, we talked about it and we want to bring you on as our full-time flight instructor. And I was like, awesome.
Nice.
So I was kind of locked in then.
So this place was flying regional?
No. This was literally, it's called Griffin Flying Service, based in Port Clinton, Ohio now. They used to be based in Sandusky. So their bread and butter actually was the islands on Lake Erie and maintenance. They had a maintenance shop. So this actually has nothing to do with airlines. So it's one of those odds and end jobs that I just fell into kind of. Fortunately, I'm really glad. It was a great place to launch my aviation career.
So then who were you instructing as a flight instructor then?
So actually, I'll build up to that because that actually took me some time to get anywhere with the flight instruction, because the last instructor they had, it was like 2 years prior to that, and it kind of just, the instructions department fell off the map, and they wanted me to bring it back. Like, wow, okay, that's a big task, but it actually worked out pretty well. So I went from cleaning airplanes, and then I started basically advertising and marketing for myself and for the company for flight lessons. And that slowly came in. And basically what they did, their bread and butter, like I said, it wasn't associated with airlines, was to serve the Lake Erie Islands. There were 4 islands actually on the U.S. side, and then that area is pretty close to the Canadian border. So there's one island, and it's called Pelee Island in Canada. So they service those, particularly actually in the winter, because when the lake would freeze, the ferries couldn't run. So that's when they got busier. And there were people that lived there full time. So they had a postal contract. They flew school kids back and forth.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
What's that flight time?
I mean, to Pelee Island, which is the furthest, it's probably like 20 minutes from the main airport.
And what kind of planes are these?
They're mostly 4-seat and 6-seat. There was one of our planes, it's been a while since I've flown it. I think it had like 10 or 12 seats. It was a twin engine piston, so propeller driven airplane. But yeah, they just flew freight. People went up to Pelee to go hunting, had cabins up there and stuff. But so yeah, I basically, once I started getting students, that kind of trickled in. It took a little while. And then to fly the islands, there was a regulation from the FAA that says you have to have 500 hours to do that kind of flying. So I built my time up to that, to hit 500, and then started kind of mixing stuff in. I did some of the island flying, delivered mail, and then also instructed. And then
I delivered mail. That's so funny.
Right? I mean, it was pretty unique. And the funnier thing about it is generally whatever pilot, it was a one pilot deal. So the pilot that was going to fly the mail that morning would literally, when you get to work in the morning at like 6 a.m. or something, you would pick up the company van, drive, I mean, Port Clinton's small, but you would drive like 10 minutes into town, park the van at the back of the dock, the loading dock, load the mail yourself into the van because they would already have it separated for the islands.
Wow.
Drive back, throw it in the airplane, and take off. And literally just like several minute hops to drop this mail off. Somebody would meet you at one of the islands to swap it.
Really?
And then actually the smallest one, North Bass, there was nobody there. The island was so small. It was a little shack. And you pull up to the shack, and then you had the key to the mailboxes. So you look like a postman, just opening the door and putting it in by name. So yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty unique. But
yeah, that's wild. It's like, okay, so is that USPS that contracts with you, or just any kind of mail?
Yeah, it was, that was a postal service contract.
Okay, cool.
So
So they don't do it themselves. They just partner with, I'm assuming this is pretty similar in any kind of area like that. They partner with these companies that you worked for that are delivering the mail for them.
Yeah, I'm sure there's other unique places that have a little bit of a remote situation where it doesn't make sense for them to bring their own service. So they're just going to contract somebody to do it.
So were you doing the flight instruction at the same time as starting to do these other things too, or did you move on to those things?
So once I had that 500 hours to fly the islands, it was intermingled. So like if it was my morning to do the mail, I would do that. And then, maybe right after that, I'd have a student at 8 or 9 o'clock, 2-hour lesson with the student. And then, it built up. So then they had a little charter operation too. So they had a King Air, which is a twin engine turboprop plane. And you could, that the range on that depends on the model, but it's like, 3 to 4 hours, maybe more. So we had some charter trips, and maybe I'd sprinkle in a charter trip. So sometimes I'd have a day that I did 3 different things, which again, that's why I thought it was pretty cool, because I was getting a lot of experience as basically a brand new pilot.
And how many hours per day do you think at that point you were accruing?
Oh, that's kind of tough. Like the island flying, the flights were so short. So it was like 10, maybe 15-minute flights. So it's funny because like people that looked at your logbook, so you have to keep a logbook that keeps track of your flight time. It could be digital, it could be, handwritten, which is, I mean, there's an actual book that is designed for this, but I don't have a digital one. I just haven't even started, and it seems like a lot of work at this point. But you just have to log your flight time. And it's funny because now, like today, for example, I just flew from, it's funny, like, where did I start my day? Chicago, Boston, Denver. So right there, that's only 2 landings total. And I don't know, probably close to 8 hours, 9 hours of flight time, something like that.
Yeah.
But then I was doing like maybe 15, 20 landings in a day and only got an hour of flight time because they were so short.
That's crazy.
So the building of the flight time was different then. I don't know. It just depended. I'd say on average, maybe like 5 hours a day, a couple hours with a student and other stuff mixed in. And sometimes I'd have 2 students. So it just depended.
So at this point, were you thinking, I love this, I want to do this forever, or I want to move to bigger planes, or I want to move to a city, or what?
Honestly, that's another cool thing that I appreciate about the career path I had, is that I never felt, well, except for one time, I never felt like I'm tired of this and I'm ready to move on. I was enjoying it, and I was never somewhere I guess, in my own mind for too long. My career path kind of worked out pretty good. So I was at that company for about 2.5 years. And there was a guy that I worked with there who went to work for a charter company, which only operated people's private jets. It was an aircraft management company in Cleveland. So that was probably, I don't know, an hour and a half away. And probably about 6 months, him and I had flown together at Griffin for some charter trips. And about 6 months after he left, he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, we're hiring. Where are you at with your flight time?" Because they also have a minimum. It's not like the airline minimums. It's basically whoever they're insured by kind of gets to set that flight time minimum. So as soon as he told me that, I'm like, holy crap, I can go fly a jet now. A private jet. I was like, that's pretty cool. I had no idea that's where I was going to end up. So I applied, interviewed, and started working at SkyQuest. So
what is that? The difference? I mean, obviously you have the prop planes and then the jets, right? And there's obviously a different way about going to flying those planes. So how did you learn going from that to that? And was it an easy sort of transition, or?
I would say because of my experience from that gradual stepping stone of the different planes I flew at the family company, it was a little easier of a transition for me. I mean, like in flight school, I flew a 4-seat single engine propeller driven airplane. It's got like, I don't even remember now. It's got like 160 horsepower or something. So that was strictly for training. And then you move up and, the twin engine propeller plane I flew at Griffin, that was like, each engine was 300 horsepower. So things gradually moved up for me. And then I was in the King Air, which is a turboprop. So turboprop, for people who don't know, it sounds silly and you might ask why it's even a thing, but it's a propeller attached to a jet engine. And it has different performance characteristics than a jet and different than a prop. So it's kind of that in between performance wise.
So you kind of flew a jet.
Yeah.
I guess you could say, I mean, it was a jet engine.
But did it feel a lot different flying than when you actually went?
Yeah, performance wise, there's some noticeable differences. So anyway, to answer your question about the transition, basically up until that point, like I learned how to fly very basic stuff in college, and then wherever you get hired after that, that company is pretty much responsible for teaching or training you on their airplanes. So, or they contract the training out. So when I went to SkyQuest, they don't do any training in-house per se for the jet. So they send you to, there's a facility called CAE. It's a training facility which has, I don't know, probably 40 different simulators that are 40 different types of airplanes.
Wow.
So they send you there for whatever they're hiring you to fly. And it's probably about a month-long course, ground school. So you're in class with an instructor that's talking about systems and stuff. And then what does that consist of? Some of the stuff I say, and I'm like, I realize people might not even know what I'm talking about. So like systems would be on the airplane. So electrics, pneumatics, hydraulics, different stuff like that. So you learn all those things, and then you learn just how to operate the airplane. And honestly, a question I get a lot is, people see pictures of the cockpit and they're like, there's so many buttons up here. How do you know what you're doing?
Yeah.
Well, that's because of training. And you sit in a cockpit simulator before you even push buttons, and you learn where they are, because contrary to popular belief, they're not all in the same place. I mean, you do have a yoke, how you fly the airplane, you have throttles. Yeah, those are in the same place pretty much, but all the other buttons are different. So you kind of learn in a simulator where those buttons are. And so the Beechjet, which is the first jet I really ever flew, is different than the 737 by a big margin. It's different than the 777, which is what I actually started on at United. I also flew a Challenger for charter. So all those airplanes are different. Each time you fly a different airplane, you go back to training for it.
So I was not talking about the space shuttle.
Damn it. Yes, I am.
Oh.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I always look at the cockpit and get immediately overwhelmed. It's kind of like looking at a soundboard for like an audio engineer with all the little dials and buttons, and you go, I don't even know where to start. I get a migraine immediately. So it's kind of impressive that you remember what every single thing does in the cockpit.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because as I said, they're all different, and going to an airline was a big change for me. I mean, there's a lot of things that were different. Like one of the seemingly simple things that was wow, this is going to be different for me, was parking at a gate. Like to most people, that's normal. That's what the public knows is parking at a gate. In charter, I never parked at a gate. I parked at what's called an FBO. Maybe you guys know what that is, where you're just literally out on what's called the ramp, and it's just open. And then you open the doors, there's stairs, there's a chauffeur car picking somebody up. So that was a big difference for me. And you could ask my girlfriend, Marissa. She's actually helped me. She helped me a lot in a lot of ways with the job at United because I was terrible at like uploading documents and stuff, figuring out how to change the file size. So from that all the way up to legitimately training for the airplane, before we got sent to training, they would give you like a paper mock-up of the cockpit again, so you could learn where the switches were, because it's not like I just knew where the 7-3 switches were. So I literally, in our office at home, I taped these up to the wall, and I would just get a chair, bring my office chair over, and like get familiar with where everything is. And then it is overwhelming for a new airplane, even for a pilot. It's like, all right, I got to figure this out. And it's funny because it would take me a while to go through what we call a flow. There's flows for like pre-flight, before takeoff, after landing. There's different flows we have to make things more efficient. Otherwise, before we took off or after we landed, passengers would be like, why are we still sitting here? So the flows just make us more efficient. But like at first I was like, where's that switch again?
Yeah, right.
Obviously, if I did that now, that'd be a problem. But yeah, it's a much smoother operation once you know where everything is.
Are you mostly using the same kind of set of switches or buttons or knobs each flight, or is it kind of varying based on like the weather or where you're taking off from or whatever?
For the most part, yeah, I would like the flows keep us in a pattern where we're using most of the same switches. But to your point, it does depend. For example, we don't always turn on the radar. We don't always need it, but if there's going to be weather on departure or arrival or en route, yeah, the radar comes on.
Because there's switches like for the lights. Like there's just a switch for everything, right? Everything on the plane.
There is. So the light switches actually, mostly the exterior lights, we're manipulating those pretty often. The cabin lights, there's a switch that we could adjust those, like basically off or on, where we can cut the power to them completely, but we don't have like when the lights change in the cabin, that's the flight attendants. So most of our stuff is just what's up behind the cockpit door and then all the lights on the outside.
All right, let's be honest here. Do you ever forget to turn off the seatbelt sign?
No, never.
You ever been on a plane, no turbulence? Yeah. Or you're like, in a whole hour it's on and you're like, I had to be so bad.
Come on. Listen, I mean, there's been times I've been a passenger and I've thought the same thing. Come on. But then I know. Sometimes I'll actually pull out my work iPad if I happen to have it with me, because we have apps that show where the turbulence is, because I'm like, okay, maybe if I was up there, maybe they're waiting for that turbulence.
Can you explain to the listeners what is turbulence? Like what is happening when you feel turbulence? And like, is the plane actually dropping? What is happening?
I would say a majority of the time, when people say that the plane just dropped 1,000 feet, it did not drop 1,000 feet. I don't know that I have ever, in 10 years of flying, seen my altitude drop 1,000 feet in turbulence. And I've hit some bad turbulence.
What's the most you think it's dropped?
For you,
yeah.
Oh, maybe 300.
Really?
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Usually,
like in how much time would that be?
I mean, probably within like 5 seconds, which if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
I've gotten a couple jolts. So even if you feel like a jolt where it feels like everything just shook abruptly, I mean, typically still you're not dropping the altitude. In the back, it feels like a lot more than it probably does. For example, we've had the flight attendants call from the back and say, it feels bumpier back there than it probably does up front. And usually they'll say, hey, could you guys turn the seatbelt sign on or something?
Okay. Yeah.
So
I see. And that's the general consensus when you pick your seat is like, if you want to avoid less turbulence, you should pick up in the front, right?
I mean, I guess.
Yeah, kind of.
The best rule of thumb I would say is, we always, what's the announcement we always make? Once the seat at cruise or whatever, once the seatbelt sign's off, hey, feel free to move about the cabin, but we do encourage you keep it fastened when you're seated. Mm-hmm. It's just because it's the environment that we're dealing with. The apps, the reports are not always accurate. So go back and answer your question about what it is. It's it can develop from many things, but it's basically disturbed air. some people are probably familiar with the jet stream. So that's a column of air at a specific altitude, and it fluctuates based on time of day and time of year. Generally, it drops further south and it becomes stronger, just meaning faster in the wintertime, and it's weaker and further north otherwise. So if our route of flight crosses the jet stream, you might have, 50 knot air, and then next thing you know, you're flying into a column of 120 knot air. That's obviously going to make some bumps.
And that air is going in one direction, right? Or is it all kind of moving around?
It kind of depends on the time of year, but sometimes it's like a sine wave almost throughout, but that's across the whole country.
Yeah.
So, it literally fluctuates all day, every day.
And how do you know where to navigate within that? Like, what information are you getting?
So we have approved weather apps on our work iPads, and there's so many weather functions that they display. So we can see the jet stream on there, and it's basically a meteorological forecast. Like, they're looking at winds aloft. So just anywhere from the surface all the way up to 50,000 feet is the winds are kind of being predicted.
And do you get information from flights previous or that have flown the same route or similar routes beforehand to be like, hey, it's a bit rough, this morning or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. So we actually have a pretty cool app called SkyPath, and the way it works is our iPads mount actually right under the window on our respective sides, and once it's mounted and stabilized, just because it's mounted to the airplane, when it feels the airplane shake, it leaves a little trail.
Oh.
And so the more it shakes, the darker it's from nothing to yellow to orange to red. So if it's red, that would indicate, pretty heavy turbulence. It would say it was severe. So yeah, we have that app, and we can watch any company or any aircraft that subscribes to that service shows up on there, and a lot of people use it. So we get some pretty good data from that. It's not 100% accurate, nothing is, but it gives us some pretty good data. And that's sometimes if we don't hear anything from air traffic control, and the only way they know is if another airplane reported it to them just over the radio. So
and is that on the honor system? Like if there was some bad turbulence, and is the pilot obligated to report that, or what does that look like?
It's highly suggested to report it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's no real obligation except that you should look out for your fellow aviators and their passengers and their flight attendants, because there are times where flight attendants do get injured, from not knowing that turbulence is coming, and that's because we didn't know. So yeah, it's a due diligence for sure.
Yeah.
What about, because I don't know how weather tracking really works, if it's real time, so are you ever in a situation where you're flying and you're like, hey, the weather up ahead's looking really bad. We need to try to avoid it. Is that your call? Does somebody always tell you beforehand before you even get in that kind of situation? Or does that work? Because I know you were saying there was a bad storm once, you guys had to divert, right?
Yep.
So obviously they didn't know beforehand that taking that route was not going to be okay. So what does that usually look like?
I can't speak for that specific situation because you said that was charter, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what resources they're using or what they have or how far ahead they're looking. I mean, but for example, when I was flying charter, we didn't have what's called a dispatcher. So they're a legally certified position that has a lot of knowledge and experience. And so they're the ones that actually dispatch our flights. So they're the ones that send us our flight plan. And they've filed the route, the altitude. They've let us know about any potential weather issues. There's a lot of stuff that they can advise us. And if we have any issues en route, we also have the ability to contact them over the radio to discuss any issues. Or actually, it's kind of like a text message system that we can message them about stuff that's not an immediate issue. So for example, air traffic control, they certainly have their own weather. All air traffic control facilities throughout the country have meteorologists in the station. And actually, United for sure has a meteorologist at our headquarters. So they're looking at this stuff every day, all the time, because the ultimate goal is to be ahead of the weather so that we're not delaying flights, or if we're going to delay flights, we know about it, or worst case, we have to cancel a flight. So, that's upper level stuff at the company from the operations department. So the dispatchers, they help us with weather. The air traffic controllers, we do our own flight planning, the night before we start looking at stuff, because weather changes so frequently. If you're looking a week out, it's kind of pointless in my opinion. So you kind of know what you're getting into. And then, it's kind of interesting, maybe if you guys remind me, we'll get into it a little bit, about how, on a very basic level, from my understanding about how air traffic control works and how many sectors are involved. But they have somebody, like I said, a meteorologist, looking at the big picture from like coast to coast, or even oceanic stuff, because all that weather is going to have an impact on the whole system. It's not just my flight. There's thousands of flights up there. And then that gets into the whole capacity thing. People, I guess I'm about to jump into it. But, you could be sitting at one airport and they're like, hey, sorry, we're delayed for weather. And everybody's, you're sitting on the plane, or they're sitting at the gate and they're looking out the window like, what weather? Well, it could be weather en route, or it's weather at the destination, which is affecting the airport's capacity or the route to get there. So,
yeah, that's super annoying.
Why is my flight a half hour longer going back to Denver from like Florida, for instance, than it is from Denver to Florida?
That goes to the prevailing winds in the jet stream.
There you go.
Which typically moves west to east. Typically. I mean, sometimes it's coming out of the northwest or the southwest, but typically it's an east flow. So yeah.
So you're taking the jet stream, and it's helping you cruise along when you're heading east, and then when you head back west, you're fighting them.
Exactly. More so in the winter, like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of further south, because like I'd say in the summertime it shifts up more over Canada for our region of the world. But like today, for example, I left Boston heading back to Denver, and at one point during the flight, it's again because it's like a sine wave pattern, not always that exact shape. At one point during the flight, we're facing 120 knots of wind. Now people are like, well, that's crazy, but it's pretty common. And because it's a sustained wind and we're not shifting from air column to air column at that point, you don't feel it. It just slows you down. So yeah, 120 knots right off the nose today. And by the time we got further west, it shifted down to like 70 and then 50.
So were you going full blast when you're going against this wind?
Full blast, baby.
Yeah. So how do you make up time? Like when people are like, oh, we're gonna make up that little bit of time, does that mean you're like you cranked it up to an 11?
You put the turbo on.
Like you hit the NOS button on the airplane.
That's it. That's the only way. All right. Well, I have to let the cat out of the bag, I guess. So there's always some kind of cushion built into airline scheduling. Most people probably have figured that out. The other things that can be a factor is, so I talked about dispatch sends us our flight plan. They predict, or the flight planning system predicts, an average taxi time. So if we happen to hit what we call banks, like if it's the big push for the morning or the afternoon or whatever, that's when it's going to take longer to get out from the gate into the air. So unforeseen traffic issues on the ground. If they filed us for longer taxi time than it actually took, like in Boston today, for example, I think they filed us for like 20 minutes of taxi time or 25 minutes. And I think from the time that we pushed back until we were in the air, it was like 15. So there's 10 minutes off right there. We can change, depending on the wind speed is different at different altitudes. So if we change our altitude, we can potentially get out of the wind. Why would the dispatcher file us at what they consider an optimum altitude? Typically something like they're looking at everything. They're looking at winds, they're looking at turbulence. But if we get up there and the predicted turbulence doesn't exist now, maybe it died off or that air column shifted from when it was filed, that turbulence might not be there. Or if it was there and they weren't predicting it to be there, maybe we want to change altitudes to get out of it. Well, that altitude could hinder or help our ground speed. So how much wind we're facing.
It could help.
I don't know if I answered what you said, but
I think so.
Yeah. So if you could fly at an altitude that would help, why wouldn't you always fly at that altitude?
A lot of it has to do with fuel burn. So the lower an airplane flies, the more fuel that it's going to burn. It doesn't matter what kind of airplane, a jet or a prop.
So you may get there faster, but you might spend more fuel, which costs the company money.
Costs the company money. And like for today, for example, we took off out of Boston within a couple 1,000 pounds, which is a little, it's not, I mean, it's perfectly fine and legal and safe performance-wise. But we took off toward the higher end of the max takeoff weight today because the airplane was full and we had a lot of gas because we're going west into the wind. So if you don't have the leeway for extra gas in addition to the minimum required, then you may not want to fly lower because you're going to eat into any reserve gas you have. So it's very performance driven, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it makes sense. So many things I feel like that go into where you're flying, how you're flying. It's like, I feel like flying, like not just the vehicles that are in the air, but the logistics of all the airlines that are doing commercial, that are flying like cargo, regional, all that stuff. The logistics of keeping everyone in the air is just absolutely insane. Especially, there's weather everywhere around the world. Like, it's not like we have a day where it's like, yeah, there may be days where it's worse. You have a hurricane or something, right? Yeah. But there's always going to be like a storm somewhere, right? There's always going to be wind turbulence somewhere. So like, they're always dealing with cancellations or disturbances.
Yeah, I mean, we've now grown what they claim is the biggest airline in the world, I guess. We just surpassed 1,000 airplanes. So with that being said, we have routes all over the globe. And like, to your point, we could have a flight going to, Cape Town, or we could have a flight going to Sydney, and all of these flights, somebody's looking at the big picture to see, how's that flight going to be impacted by weather.
I wonder if there's a industry that relies on meteorology more than the airline industry.
I bet there is, and I only say that because of things that I read about and learn every day, like reading Nat Geo. It's like it could be like some kind of ocean operation. I don't know. I'm sure but
that industry isn't as big as the airline industry.
Sure.
The airline industry is billions of dollars.
It doesn't have the footprint.
Well, also you think like if you're disturbing like a couple of planes, that's hundreds of people, and what those hundreds of people were getting ready to go do once they got off the flight, like the business impact it might have, is like huge.
Yeah,
could be huge.
I guess it's, since we're talking about it, and whoever's listening would probably be interested in this. For example, like, so I said, when I started at United, it was a really weird time hiring, and the seniority was much different than it normally is. And what I mean by that is I got hired into the 777, which is United's biggest airplane. And I still don't, I guess the way people were shifting around, because with seniority at an airline, you can kind of bid for what you want. That's seniority is the name of the game. And I'm fortunate now, only after just over 2 years, to have some pretty good seniority in Denver, which, by the way, used to be a senior base. So the fact that I'm in Denver, based in Denver, and have a pretty good schedule is unusual.
What made Denver that way? Senior based.
Seniority strictly is based off of people's desire. Like if a big chunk of the pilots want to live here, then, or nearby, that's pretty much what pushes it to be senior. And it could, that decision could be made based on where you want to live. And each of our bases has a different type of flying. Each of our bases has different airplanes based there. Not like, for example, we don't have 777s based in Denver. So if you wanted to fly that, you're going to have to be based somewhere else.
Yeah, which I think is insane. Like, not that I wouldn't do it if I was a pilot, but like, I think it's insane that I get up and like go in my office and work, right? And some people get up and they drive 15 minutes, 30 minutes to work. Some pilots get up, go to the airport, fly somewhere so that they can start work. That's crazy.
Well, I should have said that earlier. Another one of the things I talked about, pulling up to a gate is unusual, was new to me. Commuting also was, because I left it out, but between SkyQuest and United, I worked for another charter company called ExoJet. And I was there, I don't know, for probably 2.5 years. But that company was awesome because I was able to live basically wherever I wanted. And they had what was called home basing. So where you could pretty much live wherever you wanted. Like, for example, when I worked there, we had a pilot that lived in Durango, or like Cortez, even a smaller town, even outside of Durango. And the company bought him an airline ticket to get him wherever his trip was going to start, to meet up with the plane that he was going to fly. So yeah, commuting was a whole new thing to me. And to your point of that, like I said, I started on the 777 and I was assigned San Francisco. And, I was kind of stressed out at first. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know anything about this. I'm not moving to San Fran. And then you start hearing people talk about crash pads and I'm like, those sound terrible. And I didn't really know a whole lot about it at the time. Of course, I started doing a bunch of research. But it worked out for me. Again, like the fact that I'm in Denver with the seniority that I have right now is highly unusual. So, I've talked to guys that are like, man, I was sitting at the low end of the seniority list for 5, 7, 8 years, so I moved up pretty quick. And again, that's strictly based on the market and hiring. The more people that get hired underneath you, and the people that leave or retire on top brings you up. But yeah, I was commuting to San Fran. So I was driving up from Colorado Springs to Denver Airport, getting on a plane, flying, whatever it was.
Which, by the way, is already a long commute, in my opinion, just to go from...
What is it, like an hour and a half?
To San Fran?
No, I'm sorry, from Colorado Springs to Denver International.
On a good day, it takes me about an hour and a half to get to work. Or sorry, an hour and 15.
Okay.
So yeah, I get ready for work. I drive an hour and 15 minutes. And then with commuting, they have what's called a commuter clause, or commuter policy, I think it was. And you had to ensure that if you were a commuter, meaning that you chose not to live in the base that you were assigned, that you had to get there on time. Well, you couldn't just have one flight that got you there on time. You had to have a backup. So that backup was actually what you had to take first. So then the later flight was the backup, if that makes sense. So you might be getting into your base, I don't know, depending on the flights, but between where you lived and where you were based, it could be anywhere from like 2 to 6 hours before your report time. So yeah, it turns into a long day very quickly.
And that's what's called deadheading? Is that the right term? So
deadheading, what I'm talking about is commuting, and that's basically on your own term, so to speak. That's your responsibility. If you're deadheading, it's funny, my mom just asked me about this the other day, what deadheading was. So deadheading is when you're in the back of the airplane at the direction of the company. So when you're commuting, you're not really at the direction of the company. Your work hasn't started, so to speak, until you get to your base. For example, what deadheading would be though, so the other day, actually, I deadheaded, and it wasn't on my schedule. But I flew, I'm trying to remember what it was now. I flew from Denver to San Francisco, and then I was supposed to fly up to Medford, Oregon.
Hey, Medford.
What do you guys know about Medford?
It's near Crater Lake.
Oh yeah, I haven't been up there before. You mean it's just like a cool place to go?
Worked with the tourism board.
Oh, okay, sweet. I feel like I remember you guys talking about Medford. But I was supposed to fly to Medford, and then people talk about, why is my flight delayed? Why is my flight canceled? Well, when I landed, I had a call in San Francisco. I had a call from crew scheduling, and they said, hey, you've been reassigned. You're no longer going to Medford. You're going to fly back to Denver. I don't know why. The scheduling sees the bigger picture, and they reassign you. It's not a big deal. Reassignments are not uncommon.
Are you getting paid for that though?
Yeah. So you actually get extra pay when they reassign you in most cases. So it's not bad. So instead of going to Medford, I was supposed to fly to Medford overnight and then deadhead back to San Francisco, and I think fly to Houston from there. So when they reassigned me, they said, you're going to fly back to Denver tonight. You're going to spend the night in Denver. And that night it was just a short layover. So I was actually at the Westin right there at the airport. Longer layovers, wherever we are, they'll usually put us downtown. So then the next morning I deadheaded at the direction of the company back to San Francisco to finish my trip to Houston. So yeah, that just means that the company's paying you to be in the back of the plane so that they can get you where they need you to be. That's what deadheading is.
Gotcha. And it wasn't planned, basically.
That one wasn't planned. There are trips that, like, I could have a trip for next month or whatever where it's built into the trip. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not planned and they just have to rearrange things to get you where they need you.
I see. Okay. So the difference is commuting is like where you would start your work, and then deadheading is like in the middle of your itinerary, or like they need to send you somewhere because you get reassigned and you sit in the back of the plane as a passenger.
Yes, correct.
Accurate. Okay.
Except you can deadhead as on what we'd call the first leg or the last leg of an assigned trip. It doesn't necessarily just end up in the middle, but yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where they didn't have enough seats for you to deadhead, or did they kick somebody out?
So actually, our contract is pretty good. Our contract says that if we're deadheading, the company has to put us in first class.
What? I have seen pilots in first class. I'm like,
this is crazy.
I don't like wearing my uniform if I'm deadheading, if I can avoid it, unless I'm deadheading and I literally have like an hour before my flight takes off.
Okay, so you're not obligated to wear your uniform when you're commuting or deadheading?
No, the company actually prefers that you don't, because
Gotcha.
people look at
But you have to dress nicely though, right?
I mean, technically, because you're in first class, but there's no obligation because once your uniform's off, it's not like anybody knows that you work for the company.
Are there rules? Are there dress? Is there a dress code in first class?
Probably. I don't know. I mean,
Really?
that's like a gated
pass.
Oh, dude, I honestly don't know. Probably not. I mean, I don't think they're gonna kick you out unless you have like a tattered shirt and you're wearing flip flops.
Yeah. I did hear about somebody getting kicked off of a flight because of that. It was in first class and they were wearing like a tank top or something.
Yeah, or something too revealing.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So I don't know if there's legitimate. I don't know who it's up to. That's like a whole gate agent customer service deal.
Yeah.
I just fly it.
Nice.
But
Can I ask you, what is the longest you're allowed to, by law, fly an airplane before you having to basically like be relieved of like a break or like go to sleep, or what does that look like?
so this is a fun question too. Generally speaking, it's 8 hours of actual flight time.
Within how much of like a 24-hour period, or?
Our duty day is only allowed to be 14 hours. So duty day is from the time that I arrive at the airport technically at report time. So I'm usually getting to the airport about 30 minutes before my report time, and my report time is usually an hour before departure.
Okay.
So report time is when duty starts. They don't, my drive to work is not their responsibility. Much like the commute to San Francisco is to them, like I stated earlier, that's where I'm based, San Francisco. Where I live is up to me. So yeah, duty starts at report time and ends 15 minutes after we set the parking brake at the gate. So that's anywhere in there can be 14 hours. That's stipulated by something called FAR 117. It's just rest rules and rest requirements. I got to learn a little bit about that on the international stuff. Like I said, I was on the 777, and those rules, there's a lot more stipulations to those rules. There's something like if you cross this many lines of longitude, then you have to have this many hours of rest.
Whoa.
Or if you're not, it gets really complicated.
It's crazy. On the international flights, you basically have two sets of crew, right?
Yeah. So it depends. It depends on how long it is, and I forget the numbers because I don't do that anymore. And I try to dump. There's so much stuff to know that I dump some things so that I can pick up the rest. But yeah, typically there's 4 pilots on those long flights.
Wow.
And that's kind of, so I should talk about this because it was pretty unique and interesting to me, and some people might find this interesting. A lot of people that fly international, they kind of probably just know that there's more pilots and they sleep.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't think that's a wildly.
All right. I don't remember what I knew before you had told me that because it was a while ago at this point.
Yeah.
But I probably just thought that you flew the whole thing.
You're just sticking it out.
Yeah.
Just pounding Red Bulls.
You already more coffee. You already got 2 pilots up there. Yeah, we're fine. One takes it out.
Exactly. Well, so uniquely, in the situation that I was in, getting hired into the 777, my very first flight at a major airline was San Francisco to Tokyo.
Like the longest flight, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, wild. I mean, I was already so day one of what they call NDOC, just where you learn, it was like 10 days or something where you learn all the stuff about the company, get your iPad, get your credentials. Day one of NDOC is where you learn what plane you're going to get, at least until your seniority dictates otherwise. And basically they go down the list, and the seniority is based on your age and a new class. And then after that, it's your hire date. So obviously, 65 people in my class, we all got hired on the same day, but whoever was the oldest was at the top of the list in that class. So they take the list, and whatever seats they have that they need to fill within the company, whether what base it is and what plane it is, they put that on the board, and they let the oldest person in the class pick what they want, and they just go down the list. So I think like the last 12 people, the only thing that was left was 777. It was either 777 Newark or 777 San Fran. And then it came down to like the wire, and I'm sitting there like, holy crap, dude. I'm excited. Like, I'm going to fly a 777. That's insane. But like, I'm not excited about commuting.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there like, oh God, this is nuts. But anyway, so yeah, my fast forward from that, my first flight was to Tokyo. And it was funny because the guy who I was flying with, which is called, there's so many avenues I could branch off here. A line check pilot. So you go through all your training. So you go to NDOC, and then once you're assigned your airplane and you finish NDOC, at some point after that, the company sends you to simulator training, ground school and simulator training. And I think that was about a month, maybe slightly more. And then once you're all certified, you have your what's called your type rating at that point, set 777 type rating or whatever, or, I have a 737 type rating. So I talked about all those certifications earlier that you get in your primary training, private, instrument, commercial. So when you go to fly a particular jet, that's what they call a type rating. So when you have that and you're certified, then you go fly with that line check pilot, and you fly with them. They're basically every other captain that you fly with after that is what's called like a line captain. So they're not really there specifically to train you. They're just there to be a captain. I think it's for your first like 25 hours in that airplane, you're with a line check pilot, and they're there to just make sure everything's honed in, that you're doing everything to standard and all that. So he called me 2 days before my first trip, and he was like, "Hey, my name's, I forget, Jim, and welcome to United. Excited to have you. I see that our first trip is a layover in Honolulu." And I was like, "All right, that's cool." Sweet. And he calls me back and he's like, "Hey, are you really like set on going to Honolulu?" And I was like, first of all, I'm like, I don't know. What does that mean? I don't know how to answer that question. I'm new at the airline. Like, do I have a choice? And I was like,
I bought my lay already.
"No, man, they give that to you when you show up. It's first class service." So he said, "I'll call you back." I was like, "All right." He's like, "I just figured if you're on the 777, it's a wide body international airplane. Like, let's get you on a trip that this plane's built for." And I was like, I had no idea what he was getting at that point. I think he called me back later that day or the next day or something. He said, "Hey, you want to go to Tokyo?" I was like, "What?" "Yep." So off we went.
That's awesome.
Oh, I guess the whole point of this was the whole sleep thing.
Yeah.
I'm getting sidetracked. I ramble. Marissa knows I ramble. Everybody knows I ramble. I tell the captain, "Dude, if you're tired of hearing my story, just tell me." Because people are like, "What do you guys do up there?"
I mean, you got a lot of passengers in the back. You could talk to them.
Yeah, I should just go back, get on the PA, just go back and like doing a little aisle walk. So you sleep, right? You sleep on an international flight. Maybe people don't know this. So I think Tokyo from San Fran was like 12-hour flight. Generally what happens, I told you guys earlier, 8 hours is the max you can fly. But if you're what's called an augmented crew, so more than 2 pilots, then you basically just split the flight time in half. So you're all 4 up front for takeoff and landing, and the rest of the time is split. So the captain and the rest of the crew kind of determines who's going to take breaks when. And ideally you find that out a day or two before the trip. That way you can kind of adjust your sleep schedule to that. So after takeoff and after like 18,000 feet and when everybody's comfortable, the first 2 pilots go back into a crew rest area. And I mean, you can do whatever you want. Ideally, if you think you're going to be tired, you probably should sleep, but that's your designated rest time. And then your alarm goes off, you go back up into the flight deck, the other 2 come out, take their break. And then, 45 minutes to an hour before landing, you're all back up front.
One captain or 2 captains?
That depends. That's really up to scheduling. That's up to if anybody has any certain limitations because of that. They've never been to that airport yet or whatever. There could be some different limitations. Generally, the company will try to put 1 captain and 3 first officers. Sometimes there's 2 captains. It just depends.
Okay, so you don't have to have a captain in the cockpit at all times then?
No. So in fact, it was a very interesting thing. Like, I was brand new to the airline. I was sitting just because the other first officer was senior, and he's like, at that point, it really doesn't matter what seat you're sitting in. Like, the flight controls are the same on both sides. The only thing that's different really is on the left side, there's what's called a tiller, and that's how you steer the airplane. That's attached hydraulically to the nose wheel. So that's how you actually steer the plane on the ground. Most airplanes don't have a tiller on the right side. I think the 777 did, just as a backup. But really, that's the only difference between the...
Wait, so this is like really new to me and kind of blowing my mind. So are the controls duplicated? Like, is it split down the middle? Like, you have one set of controls and then it's just the same set of controls on the other side?
They are connected, and most airplanes have the ability, if something gets jammed up with the controls, to separate them.
Oh, okay.
So that if there's a jam between the 2, that you can separate the bad side from the good side.
Oh, wow.
So the yokes move together, for instance, if you turn one.
If I turn my yoke, his is going to deflect the same as mine.
Wow.
Or like the pedals, the rudder pedals on the floor, same thing. If I push my pedals, his pedals move, or vice versa. So yeah,
But what about all the switches on the ceiling and so on? Like, I can't imagine they're all. Like,
that's not duplicated.
Okay.
So like in the 737 and most airplanes that I have flown, there's a center console down here between us, and then all the stuff on the dash, so to speak, and then everything overhead. So yeah, that stuff is not duplicated. Like,
but you could reach that stuff from either seat.
Yeah, if I needed, I'd have to kind of in the 7.3, I'd have to like reach over a little bit, but I could reach it from my seat if I needed to. And then the only time I'd really need to do that is the other guy becomes incapacitated or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you sleep first or you flew first?
On the flight to Tokyo, I don't remember, honestly. All I can tell you that I think I slept first. So it's interesting too, on those planes that each type of plane that has a crew rest area, they're a little different. I don't know. We have 757s, 767s. I don't know much about those. I've never been on them. I've been on a 787 as a passenger, like going to all the international places we've been. I don't know what their crew rest area looks like necessarily. I've never been in it. But on the 777, there were 4 models, an 777-200 ABC and then a 300 ER. And that one actually has an overhead sleep compartment. So you literally, right in front of business class, there's a door and you go up this really skinny set of stairs and there's like 2 business class seats. And right behind those are 2 beds, like 2 bunks separated by a wall.
Wow.
So you could choose to sit in the chair and recline, or you could get in the bed, and there was always a fresh set of, just like business class has, you have your blankets and stuff. There's a fresh set of linens up there. So yeah, you just get up there and make yourself a little nest egg and take your nap.
That's nice. Is that the same for the attendants too?
I've never seen theirs, but I know they have
their own.
They have something similar in the back.
It's economy chairs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. They don't recline at all.
But what I was going to say is interesting is on the 200 models, it's like it is this closet outside of the cockpit behind it. The little aisle up to the cockpit, it's like closet doors, and there's 2 bunks in there. So that's like the chintzier model of the crew rest area. Typically in those configurations, what the company will do is block off 1 business class seat for us. So then it's between the crew to decide who gets that seat. That flight, excuse me, the captain was like, "This is your first flight. You can have whatever you want," So I was like, "I'm taking the business class seat." Yeah. What I do specifically remember about that, though, I don't remember if I slept first or not, but what I do remember is, I went to the bathroom. There's a crew, it's not really just for crew, but you can block a door off and we can change and stuff up there because I'm not taking my break in my uniform. So you can just put on whatever, sweatpants and a t-shirt. And what has still stuck with me is I come out of the cockpit from flying the airplane. I change my clothes, and now I'm in this cabin with, 350 people on the 777. And I'm like, do they even know that I mean, for people that fly international all the time, like they're used to it now. But for me, I was brand new to an airline, and here I am just going to seat 1A and laying down and taking a nap. And I had the hardest time falling asleep because I was like, I was like, this is just crazy that I'm like sleeping at work.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Legally.
Sleep.
It's so crazy if you're someone who's sitting up there and like you saw you go into the cockpit like early on with your uniform on, and then you just come out at some point and you're like, well, who's flying the plane?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. But sometimes I wonder, like, people in the business class are watching their movie or drinking their wine. They're not paying attention most of the time. So I finally fell asleep, and then when I woke up, like my heart was pounding, and I was just like, all right. I think I took the second break because I woke up like 2 hours before I needed to be up front. And
so you actually slept? You actually fell
a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
I woke up and I was like, holy crap, I'm in Japan. As a new pilot, the point is for you to land. Like, they want you to get experience. So this probably terrifies some people, but it's the truth. So you go to training in the simulator. The simulators are full motion simulators. So like the first time you fly the real airplane is the first time you have flown it ever.
With all the people on it.
With all the people on it. And I'm not hiding it. It's the truth. That's what happens with every training situation. But those simulators are so realistic that, once you're in the simulator, like it's the same thing. And the motion is pretty damn close to reality. I mean, you can't 100% simulate the environment. Like, that's a little different. But and density of the air, it's a little bit hard for that stuff. But anyway, it's close enough that the FAA says, yeah, that counts for training. So the first time I landed the airplane was in Japan, and you look back on that now. I didn't get that many landings in the triple because I wasn't on it that long. And the funny thing with that is I was talking about how like I could do 3 flights, or 2 legs in a day on the 7-3, and I don't know, 15 landings a day at my very first job. So things have changed. But then you have like a 12-hour flight. There's only 1 landing, so only 1 pilot gets the landing. Mm-hmm. So it's you don't have as much. It actually comes down. It actually comes down to a currency issue, believe it or not. So yeah, some guys do, because if you're on an international plane that doesn't get that many landings and the flight time's really long, you have to have 3 takeoffs and landings within the preceding 90 days. So some guys that fly international a lot don't get those landings, so they'll flip a coin for it or whatever, bet each other a beer for it or something, because if you don't get your landings, you have to go back into the flight training center and do them in a simulator, and nobody wants to do that if they can avoid it.
That sucks.
I mean, we go back every 9 months for training anyway. That's mandatory by the FAA, but you don't want to have to go back any more than that just to do landings if you don't have to.
Yeah, right. That makes sense.
So
I feel like this has got to be the best part of flying, especially, I mean, maybe it gets old for international, but you're always going places. And sometimes you've got a little bit of a layover, right? You might have like an afternoon or a morning or something, or just overnight, and you can explore, right?
Yeah. So that is one of the great things about the job that I do love. There are places I don't really care to go.
You don't like going to Afghanistan, we know.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I don't like holes in the airplane. So, but I don't know. I guess, like, for example, Newark. I mean, you're staying at the airport Marriott on a short layover. I don't need to go there.
Yeah.
There's other places that I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but, and then, there's other places I get to go. Like this last trip, for example, I got reassigned at the beginning. So I had that layover in Denver that wasn't planned. And then I had 12 hours or something in Chicago. I had 10 hours in Houston. No, I had 13 hours in Chicago, 10 and a half hours in Houston, which 10 hours is the minimum rest time, because I think you were asking about that a little bit earlier. Well, you were asking about how much flight time we can have, but like actual rest time at the hotels is 10. But then I've had other times where a cool place that I've enjoyed going was San Juan, Puerto Rico. Especially this time of year, it's nice to go down where it's tropical and warm, and I'm paid to be there, so it's all right. But those layovers are like 22 hours. So,
whoa,
so you get a little bit of time.
The only caveat on the Denver trips is, like I said, every base has different flying. Sometimes those trips get in at like 9, 10 o'clock at night. And then because you're there for 22 hours, of course, you're leaving on a red eye. So this time of year, the red eyes leave San Juan at 2 a.m. Not fun.
Wow.
I guess the main reason for that is because those red eyes go to Newark, and so they're getting people up there at like 5 a.m. for their connections for the day, whether they're going to east or west, whatever. But yeah, there's definitely some cool places. The other cool thing about it is every once in a while I get to meet up with friends or family in different places. So, my cousins live in Florida. My family lives back in Ohio. I don't get a lot of trips there, but if I have, I'd meet up with them. But
when you fly down to Colorado Springs, you get to see your girlfriend.
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah.
Do you have to go through customs and all that on international flights, like both at the place, like for instance in Tokyo, and then when you come back, like what does that look like compared to like the average like passenger experience?
It's fantastic because you get there and there's like a crazy line, and there's a crew line, so we usually get escorted pretty quickly up to that line.
Smuggle shit.
Oh,
it could
nice.
take yeah, exactly. It could take I don't know, an hour to get through customs for regular people, and we're through in
He's bringing so much produce back.
Yeah, baby.
Nobody's asking a single question.
Hey, those dogs are going to find my bags as much as yours.
Dude, New Zealand, when I went to New Zealand, they were like, wearing hiking boots, you have to go in this line.
What?
Like, they're so crazy.
Were you guys
about
wearing hiking boots?
Pests. Yes, we were. And they
did you know? Kind of did they say because you have the boots on, you have to go? Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
They were like, if you have tents, hiking poles, boots, like, doesn't even matter if you're wearing them. If you have them, Like, they're going to scan your shit. They're going to see it. You're not going to get in trouble, but I mean, I think they can fine you.
Why do they
I
do
mean,
that?
how do they know I didn't hike in my tennis shoes?
Good point.
Dude,
Good point.
exactly.
I know what you're going. I know where you're going with this.
All these people wearing boots were just going in the regular line, but we were specifically told, they were like, no, you need to go over here. Yeah, it's crazy. They're so crazy about it. They literally, we get up there, we're in the special line that goes to the same place, and the guy's like, oh, okay, what do you have? Oh, we have hiking boots. Okay, let me see them. I lift my boot up so he can look at underneath my boot, I guess to make sure it didn't have too much mud.
What are you looking for?
Yeah, right.
Wait, yeah, what are they exactly looking for?
It's like pests,
And
agricultural pests.
And did they find it?
They did not. And
What would they have done if they did?
I know. I was like thinking to
Go to
myself,
jail?
I could destroy New Zealand.
We need to talk to you in this private room. Yeah, when I went to some of the parks in Colorado are really strict too. Like there's one actually not too far from here. If you bring your paddleboard, you have to unravel it. They have to inspect it, and they have a brush and like a spray thing to spray it down because they don't want any contaminants or like foreign invasive species in the reservoir.
Yeah,
Makes
that's
sense.
super common for the waters.
Yeah, the waters. Yeah.
Yeah, like where they scrape or they like inspect the bottom of the boats and stuff too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me of the whole security thing. I was traveling. This was years ago before the airlines, but I was traveling wherever, and I was behind this lady, and her bag got pulled aside, and the guy said, he was trying to ask her questions, and at first I wasn't sure what he was probing about. Funny word. In a second, you'll see why. And he said, there's something in this bag that we have to take a look at. We suggest that you step in the office. And she was like, no, there's nothing. It's fine. Like, whatever, just look at it, whatever you need to look at. And he's like, he asked her a couple more times, and he said, okay. And he pulled out a big dildo.
Yeah.
So apparently she forgot it was there. I don't know.
Somebody
snuck it in.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
We've played jokes on people, or at least I know friends who've done that exact thing to other friends, flying from like a bachelor party or something. So I have two questions that just come to mind. Actually a lot more, but when you're balancing balancing the weight in the plane, like who's sitting where, and like what does that look like? Because
on Frontier they always make you move around.
They make you move around, and they're like, it's heavier on one side. Is there like a weight sensor? And how accurate is this? Like, what are we looking at?
All right, what a great question. Call my load planning department. Actually, in reality, though, I don't know where people are sitting.
Yeah.
And obviously, we do have assigned seating, but people, if they see a bunch of empty seats, they're probably going to move around.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, a lot of time, whenever that happens, it's, we might get a message from our load planner to this text message computer thing I was talking about earlier. It's where we do all of our flight planning and stuff. It's usually after we push back from the gate, and load planning says, based on what they know about who was assigned what seat, if they determine because it was such a light load, usually when it's really light is the only time this is a factor, because if every seat's full, the plane is designed to not be out of balance. So
what if you got a bunch of fatties on one side of the plane though, and it's a full flight?
So that's the thing. The side doesn't matter.
Okay.
Forward or backward is what matters. The plane doesn't know if you're on the left or the right. It doesn't care.
I always thought it was like left versus right.
No.
Now this is making sense.
The forward to back is what makes a difference.
Okay.
So yeah, if there's too many fatties in the back, they're gonna get moved.
So the plane just won't take off, right?
Airplanes have a center of gravity range, and if it's not within that range, we can't take off. It's not safe.
Okay. So that gives me into another question. Autopilot.
What's that?
What's the deal? I don't know. So
never heard of her.
Yeah, right. So what extent is autopilot flying these planes? When do you take over? Is there a mandatory amount of time you have to take over? What's the deal?
There's limitations on what altitude it can be engaged at on takeoff and when it has to be disengaged on landing. There are, of course, exceptions to all the rules. We have to tell the autopilot what to do. It doesn't know what to do. It's pretty good at doing what it's supposed to once we tell it to,
It's like ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a
same
good
thing.
Fly the plane in the sky.
I gotta pee real quick.
It's really that simple. No, I'm glad you asked, because obviously a lot of people do ask and really don't know. Personally, my use of the autopilot, I try to hand fly as much as possible because I want to keep my skills up to snuff. You can do that as little or as much as you want as a pilot. It's your call. Generally, in a high workload environment, we're going to get the autopilot on sooner and leave it on longer because it takes our workload down, because we can focus on managing it and doing some other tasks. You might be asking, like, well, if you're not flying it, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Sleeping.
Exactly.
Taking little snooze breaks.
It's funny. I've had a captain say, don't let me wake up from my nap and catch you asleep.
Yeah, right.
Joking, guys. Joking.
Yeah.
Seriously. Seriously joking.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I usually like hand fly up to 18,000 feet. And then around that point, maybe I'll turn the autopilot on.
So you always taking off manually?
Yes. The autopilot never takes off.
Okay.
There are a few rare scenarios where the autopilot lands.
Weather, right?
Weather. Nailed it. So it basically gets down to what you would say like 0 visibility, which essentially means you can't see anything until you're on the pavement. It's not quite that drastic. Like, you do have to see there are parameters that we have to see something to land. But there is a feature called auto land. Other than auto land, we're always taking off and landing the airplane.
Gotcha.
Manually.
Gotcha.
How does it know where the ground is?
Yeah.
Because it can't see either,
doesn't.
right? So you have to tell it what
I don't know
altitude the land
This is a Jesus take the
runway
wheel
is?
situation.
Yeah, right.
Like, for real. Like, you can't see anything.
Off by 1 foot.
It's on you now.
The autopilot has no idea. The autopilot, once again, is just doing what we tell it to do. So we have charts and procedures for aligning us with the runway if we can't see it.
I don't like this answer.
I don't like the sense.
It's a great answer.
I want to know it's super sophisticated and it can do your job 100%. Yeah. That's what I want to. But you choose not to.
AI is
That's
not
what I wanna
taking
know.
my job. In reality, yeah, it's we're still a long ways off from that, I think.
Oh,
and actually,
hell no.
I just heard something about Europe. They, because there was a bigger push over there from the European government, and like Airbus was developing stuff that was single pilot capable. I don't know, dude. That's a whole nother discussion we could get into. But like for me, I would, if somebody asked me that question, about one pilot in the airplane, I'd be like, I don't know. Would you get on it? I mean, because no matter the thing for me is people are like, yeah, the technology's there. I'm like, I don't care. Like, if the passengers aren't going to get on, then it doesn't matter.
It's a matter of life and death.
Yeah.
And you really going to risk it? Because I don't know, for computers.
I mean, it's not going to make it cheaper for us. Like the airline may make more money, but we'll be
they're not
going to
discount.
Probably not.
Tickets,
exactly.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, okay, yes, the autopilot does a lot for us. But that's because we're telling it what to do. Like I said earlier, my scenario always is, I don't know, you're a software engineer. I don't know much about hacking, but I assume it's possible. The scenario I present to myself is, okay, there's one pilot up there. They either fell asleep or they became incapacitated. Now the autopilot's doing all the flying. Can that not be hacked? I don't know. Yeah. I'm a little sketched out about that.
Yeah. I would imagine.
Right. I mean, if everything else can be hacked in some fashion by somebody, then why can't an airplane? And why wouldn't people try to hack an airplane? I mean, that makes
easy
9/11 way easier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you have to get on and, breach the cockpit.
Honestly, I'm surprised it's not like really more of an issue.
Yeah.
What, hacking airplanes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, so to that point, to put the public at ease, if any system malfunctioned on the airplane, I can disconnect all automation and take over manually. The autopilot is not the boss.
Have you ever, like when you were doing simulator, have you tried doing that before? Doing no automation, all manual?
And actually we're required. There's certain things that we do in training that you can't use the autopilot. And one of those situations, like, so when we get in the simulator, there's so many things that we train on. I talked about systems. We train on a lot, again, to helps put the public at ease. We train on a lot of things that could go wrong. for that reason. So we do a lot of manual hand flying. We fly the airplane around on a single engine. You have to. Like, the FAA would not even ever certify an airplane if it wasn't capable of that. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of stuff that we do, cargo fires, engine fires, things that pop up on the news and people are like freaking out. A lot of it, like, I remember one of the headlines that came up, I don't know, and maybe my timeline of things sucks, but maybe it was like a year ago. There was one of our planes going over the ocean, over the Atlantic. I don't remember, east or west, doesn't really matter. But they had a depressurization event. And, I think the headline read, United flight plunged over the Atlantic Ocean. No, they didn't. They did exactly what they were trained to do. As soon as that aircraft depressurizes, at that moment in time, it doesn't matter what caused the depressurization, because me sitting here trying to troubleshoot while everybody's passing out from lack of oxygen is irrelevant. Mm-hmm. I just need to fly the airplane, because if I stop flying, we're all going to die. Mm-hmm. So in that situation, which we were trained for, if I'm flying along at cruise altitude at 38,000 feet, there's a chart that says your time of useful consciousness. It's not, it depends on your health, but like without oxygen and without a pressurized cabin, you're not going to be conscious for very long. So our trained response is to be quick. So what they did was what they should have done. Slam the oxygen mask on and push the nose down and get down to a breathable altitude.
What's a breathable altitude?
Generally speaking, again, this is, like us out here in Colorado. Some people come out and they're struggling right here, you know? Whereas for us, it might be exact. You know what I mean? It's physiological. So for us, it could be 14,000 feet. For other people, it could be 3,000 feet.
But generally it's below 20, right?
What we descend to is 10,000. So again, this conversation could branch off so many ways, because let's talk about being over the Andes Mountains. I can't descend to 10,000 feet. I'm going to hit rocks.
Yep.
So there's procedures for that too. There's procedures for everything.
Yeah. Also over the Rockies, there's 14ers that you probably don't want to fly into.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So that's actually stuff that goes into our flight planning. Like,
He's like, oh yeah, I forgot about the Rockies.
I'm flying around from now on.
Yeah. I don't fly over the Rockies. Come on. But yeah, so like there's planning that goes into place for that. Like, hey, if these mountains are along our route, we're gonna, we have to consider, like, if we lost an engine at any point between these two fixes, is what we call them, then we're gonna have to stop at 15,000. We're not going to be able to go right to 10, and then we're going to have to maybe turn off path depending on where we are to get to a lower elevation as quick as possible.
So they have oxygen tanks on board that are constantly like, if the masks come down, like how long do you think they have to be able to?
I think it's a good 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Again, this is all stuff in the charts, and it's all comes from certification. So if the airplane wasn't capable, it wouldn't be certified to do any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then of course I guess I shouldn't say of course, but there's supplemental oxygen too. And then, so the passenger masks have a different oxygen source than we do on our crew masks, because if we actually depressurized and we had to get down, 99% chance nobody's going to die from that lack of oxygen for a short period of time. People may pass out, but as soon as you get back into breathable air, you're good. But the last person you want to pass out is obviously the pilots. So we have a different oxygen source, and that mask force feeds oxygen into our lungs.
What the thing I thought was fascinating that I didn't learn until maybe last year was how cold it is on the outside of the plane when you're that high.
True. Yeah.
So how cold is it on average when you're at cruising altitude?
I would say for most typical cruising altitudes for airlines, you're sitting around, I'll just say 35,000, and it's probably about negative 65 Celsius.
That's insane.
Like, so that's the other caveat, it's like, okay, we depressurized, all that cold air is coming in now. Like, we train to get the airplane down in a simulator. We're not going to mock the temperature, but
what is that? What causes on average, like what's the most common thing that causes a depressurization?
I would start by saying it's not common whatsoever.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
It's highly uncommon.
Yeah.
By the way, just like jump in real quick, because I know most people don't know Celsius. Negative 65 Celsius is negative 85.
Negative 85.
Good call. Because I have the readout there. I don't have Fahrenheit, so like I don't have. I know that 59 or 15 degrees Celsius, 59 Fahrenheit, but that's all I know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good addition. What can cause it? Was that the question? So there's something called a pack, and it's basically a machine that condenses air. to make it real simple. It controls the heating and cooling in the cabin, but it also controls the amount of air that's forced into the pressure vessel, the cabin, to keep it pressurized. And then somewhere on the airframe is an outflow valve. So that outflow valve modulates automatically the whole flight. And it cycles, air does circulate. It's not the same stagnant air the whole time. So it's that outflow valve and the packs are adjusting to keep the inside pressure where it needs to be for that altitude. So those valves could fail. There's backups for the valves. It's very rare nowadays for that to happen. The packs could fail, so you're not getting the air coming in. Or, how many doors are on the aircraft? Like the service doors don't really matter because those aren't part of the pressure vessel. Like the cargo doors that's not pressurized. Well, I think either the forward or the aft is, because obviously some airplanes carry pets, so it has to be pressurized or they're going to pass out.
So the people there's people in countries that have jumped into the cargo area, right? That probably end up dying because of that.
I mean, I don't know. We've had that go on in the U.S. lately in the wheel well. You guys have heard about that, right?
Yeah, the wheel well.
Obviously, that's not pressurized, but my point is there are compartments that are pressurized and other parts that are not. So the point is with the main doors on the cabin, there's service doors on the back of the airplane and there's service doors on the front, the doors that you would use in an emergency evacuation. So those doors all have seals. If that seal fails, that's another place that you could have a depressurization.
I've seen it as a passenger. Air, it's almost like it's like a vapor in the ceiling.
Yeah.
What is that?
Just the temperature difference.
Okay, gotcha.
It's just like...
Isn't it so scary?
Right?
First time I ever saw it, was like, I'm about to die.
Yeah.
There's like gasoline coming in right now.
Somebody's poisoning the cabin.
It's like chemtrails, right?
Yeah.
Where's that coming from?
Essentially.
But it's just it's all the hot bodies in there with cold air coming out. That's all it is.
So when you're in the cockpit and you're up at cruising altitude, life is good. What are y'all doing up there? Like
flying the plane, man.
What are y'all doing? Like if you're got the autopilot on, you guys playing games on your phone? Like what's going on? What do you guys typically do? I mean, like you probably have checklists and different things that you're looking at and you're monitoring levels and all. I'm assuming that, but like, are you like you both doing that?
He's playing Bejeweled on his phone.
You got Candy Crush. Like what's going on?
I don't have any of those games. Yeah. So the right answer is I'm reading my manual. I'm keeping up to date with everything.
Nice.
Yeah.
Reading company communications.
There you go. Got the iPad.
But what do other pilots do?
Obviously they slack. I'm the only one that does what I'm supposed to do.
Is it so? Like you guys talk a lot. Like, do you ever have somebody who's like, dude, I'm not a talker. Like,
oh, for sure,
leave the fuck alone.
And I mean, obviously I am a talker, and I am, but there are days where I don't have a whole lot to say, and just I'm tired. Or I just don't have much to talk about. And other times, like we're talking the whole time. But what are we actually doing in addition to that? Is you're constantly monitoring. If you're not monitoring, we're monitoring. You asked about weather earlier, like, do you know if weather's coming up? So weather if it wasn't, most of the time, even if it was not predicted, I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for, but maybe it built up bigger than it was supposed to. A storm built up bigger than it was supposed to. So as we're going along, we're constantly monitoring weather. We're constantly monitoring turbulence. We're in I should talk about this too in a second. We're constantly in communication with air traffic control. We're listening to what's going on around us, even if they're not talking to us, because it may affect us down the road. I mean, I legitimately do try to spend time as much as I think about it to brush up on the manuals, because there's so much, we have manuals that are 1,500 pages long, for the company stuff and the airplane. So there's always stuff you're going to learn that you don't use every day.
But doesn't that make you sleepy?
Yes, it does.
I get a little sleepy.
Yeah.
Just,
you tell the company that, you're like,
yes,
I can't
of course. I'm fatigued because I'm studying. And then we talk, but you're constantly manipulating the autopilot. You could be, I guess I should talk about this. I said I was going to talk about it earlier. How many different, sectors, I guess, are involved in the control of an airplane. What is air traffic control? Because what do people think about? The tower. Like, you can see the tower. You can't see where these other people are. So with an airline specifically, most of the time when you're parked at the gate, we're talking to people. We're talking to a lot of people. We're always talking. We're talking to the flight attendants. We're talking to the gate agent. We're talking to the ground crew, and that's usually through independent radio that they have on their head on the ground. Mm-hmm. So they're keeping us up to date with what's going on. Oddly enough, I don't know that most people know this, but there's a tug that pushes the plane back from the gate. Back in the day before they were all glass terminals, supposedly, I don't know how long ago this was or how common it was, but like the planes would reverse themselves from the gate. No, there is no transmission attached to the tires. They have the function of going in reverse, the engines of going in reverse, and that doesn't mean the engine spools the other way. That means the air that's coming out of the back of the engine is redirected by some bucket, and it forces the air forward. Supposedly an old guy I flew with told me that, so I don't know.
They just don't do that anymore?
There's too much stuff on the ramp. Think about all the, I don't know.
That's
I guess
the jet blast would kind of fuck things up, huh?
Everything.
Yeah.
Plus it's all glass windows, and I don't know if it always used to be that way. But anyway, so we're talking to a lot of people during the boarding process, and then once everybody's on board, we shut the main cabin door. We're talking to the ramp. So a ramp controller is really the first controller we're talking to. I don't think in most cases they don't work for the FAA. It's like a local controller. And, everybody's seen a ramp. There's a lot of airplanes, a lot of gates. So somebody has to control where all those planes are going, when they push back, where they go after they push back. So that's a ramp controller. So that's the first person we talk to. When the ground crew says, hey, everything's walk around is complete, all the doors are closed, we call ramp, we get a push clearance. Ramp, we tell the ramp guy, or we tell the tug driver, and he pushes us back wherever we were told to. They disconnect the tug, we start the engines, and then ramp transfers us at some point to a ground controller. Ground controllers control all the taxiways at that airport. They're in control of making sure that we don't run into other planes, that we're sequenced properly with all the other traffic out there, that we don't cross any active runways.
And this includes the planes who are taking off. That's also controlled by them? No, so
that'll be the tower. Okay. The tower controls whoever's actually taking off and landing.
So when you see the report like, this plane taking off, or this plane almost collided with this plane taking off at whatever airport, that's two different teams controlling those, not controlling, but coordinating those planes.
Generally speaking, yeah, that operation happens in the tower. So then you go to ground control, and then at some point ground control will hand you off the tower. And tower is the one that clears you for takeoff. And once you take off above a certain altitude, tower will tell you to contact departure. That's another, they're in a different place, generally speaking. It's all different based on the airport. Departure, if you're on a, 1 hour flight, 6 hour flight, whatever, across the country, this process is pretty similar. So departure, at some point when you climb high enough, they're going to hand you to what's called the center controllers. So that would be like Denver Center, Boston Center, Indianapolis Center. So they have big sectors that they oversee. And within each one of those sectors, it's divided up because one controller can't handle all that space. So you're handed off from center to center as you make your way across the country. And then as you begin your descent, eventually the center will hand you back to the approach controller. So when you left, it was a departure controller. Now it's an approach controller. And then as you get closer to the airport and you set up for the approach controller will hand you to the tower. They'll clear you to land. Then tower hands you back to ground, and you contact ramp and make your way to the gate. So there's a lot of communication that goes on from gate to gate.
Yeah, that's it's a lot of talking.
Is it one? So let's say busy airport, Denver. Is it one air traffic controller talking to all the people trying to land and take off, or is it multiple and they have to kind of coordinate amongst themselves?
The bigger airports generally have it broken up by runways. So like in Denver, for example, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 runways. So generally in Denver, for example, they'll split it up east side and west side of the concourse, because there's those 3 airports on each side. So that's kind of how they split it up. And the heavier workloads you could have in the tower specifically that's doing takeoff and landing stuff, you could probably have 5 controllers up there because there's so much traffic. It's interesting, if anybody's ever heard of FlightAware, you can just go on flightaware.com and type in the airport name, and you can just see how many. If you look at a busy time of day, you're not going to know what it is, but you can see it's insane how many planes are in and out.
And these you guys are just talking on radio, right?
Yeah.
Like, can anyone chime in there? Like, I could go impersonate a controller, right?
You could probably go, and I've thought about that before. It's what's called VHF. You could probably go to Radio Shack. Is Radio Shack a thing still?
Definitely not.
Well, they sell a Radio Shack coin now, so.
Oh, okay.
Dude, what?
I think so.
Amazon.
I just said it and I was like, I don't think I've been to Radio Shack like 10 years ago.
I did see one. I think it was just an old store in Wyoming. I think
That's
just
funny.
never
Change the sign. Yeah.
I don't. You could buy like VHF radios. So like some of the general aviation pilots that are like flying their own small airplanes around the small airports, they'll buy like a handheld as a backup in case the aircraft mounted ones fail.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume you could go buy that. You could buy it online probably and tune in.
So how do you know who to trust?
That's a good question. Those controllers have a familiar voice.
It's like, oh, that's Glenn. You know?
Exactly.
What's up, Glenn? That's do you fly with the same co-pilots often, or are they different every time? What is that look like?
Anyone listening that knows what we're talking about would correct me if I didn't correct you in saying co-pilots, because technically I am the co-pilot.
True that.
I have in the last 2.5 years, I have seen the same captain, maybe like 3 captains twice, but it's not. United has, last number I heard was like 17,500 pilots.
That's a lot.
That's of course separated through all of our, what do we have now? 8 bases in different fleets. So,
But how many are in Denver?
that's a good question. Don't know.
Because I feel like you would see them more often, right? I mean, you're not. Are you flying mostly the same routes, or is it really random?
It's random in the sense that I just kind of, you can bid for whatever you want, really. With, again, based on seniority. With better seniority, you're going to get what you bid for. So like the guys that I flew with before, I might not, it could be 6 months, it could be 6 years before I see them again, depending on what days we bid off for and all these different factors. So you would think I see them more often, but if they have different day off requests than me, or, but the trips are pretty random.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
I don't fly, most airline pilots don't fly a route. It is not really a thing.
Yeah. So you, I mean, thinking about like in a month, the number of, not the number of flights you're doing, but the number of routes you're doing is like 3 or 4, right? Like you're only going to Denver 3 or 4 times a month, something like that. Because you're flying
my
for
drive
like
to start work, you mean?
Yeah, because you're flying multiple days out of the week. It's not like you're doing one flight, coming home. Right?
Yeah, I could do that if I chose to, based on my seniority. Like there are day trips, and day trips generally consist of what we call a turn. So you could fly. Like the other day, I did one just because it was on my schedule. I didn't bid for it, but it was a Denver to LA turn and back. So that's what a day trip looks like. If you're doing a day trip, you don't go to 2 other airports. You're just somewhere and back usually. I don't bid those because of living in Colorado Springs, and it's just too much driving in one day. Most of my trips are, I would say the majority of my trips are 4-day trips. So yeah, I only drive to Denver, probably 3 to 4 times a month.
So that's really only, I mean, like that really lowers your chance of seeing the same captain, because you're only really getting onto a route.
Yeah, and
3 or 4 times a month.
To that point, generally speaking, I'm trying to think of a time that this has been different. There's been a few rare circumstances where during a 4-day trip, I've had a different captain somewhere sprinkled in, but generally the captain is the same. The flight attendants are different every flight. They're all they have way more pilot bases than we do, because there's probably, 37,000 flight attendants. Because you think about, there's 2 pilots on the flight deck on a 737, and there's 4 flight attendants. So there's a lot more of them. They have a lot more bases. So those, they're different every flight.
Yeah.
But the pilot,
I was just thinking, for instance, when I flew to Riverton, Wyoming, a little tiny airport, like 1 flight a day. I think 1 or 2 flights a day. And it's the small,
some regional.
Yeah, what's the United? The
SkyWest.
SkyWest, yeah. So the pilot's probably not based there, right?
Probably not. So regionals, even though it says, that's another funny thing people don't know, it'll say United Express, and then somewhere in small print it says SkyWest or DBA SkyWest. Mm-hmm. I don't know what their bases are. They have there's a SkyWest base in Colorado Springs, for example.
So not the same bases.
They do not have the same bases as United.
Okay.
Their bases are typically smaller hubs. So I don't even know where they are without looking it up. But so do they have one in whatever you said, Riverton?
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
So then what about the people who handle the bags up front, right? When you go check your bag in, for instance, those people wear United outfits.
So it just depends on where you are. It could be a United employee, it could be a SkyWest employee.
But because United is the parent company, they just wear the United branding.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, because even the SkyWest planes, they have the United paint job too. So, but a lot of people, they know they're on a smaller airplane, but they don't necessarily always see that it says Express because they just assume that those. I think some people assume those are United pilots and United flight attendants, but they're not. They work under a different contract. They work under a different company. Yeah. We basically, I don't really know even how it works when airlines reach out and say, hey, I don't know if it's an annual thing where they say, hey, we want you to fly these. I don't know, these routes for us. But
yeah.
There's one thing I looked up one time, but honestly, I don't know how that process works.
Yeah.
Because to your point, like Delta has their own regional agreements and, we have our own. So I don't, and it changes. I mean, over the history of aviation, there's been so many mergers and acquisitions and stuff. So
Star Alliance.
Yeah, baby. That's actually, Marissa and I have taken advantage of that for the first time. We went to Tahiti, I don't know, like a week ago. We just got back from a trip and we flew, I guess it's just called non-rev on Air Tahiti. So that was pretty cool because they're part of the Star Alliance.
Yeah. Wait, is that just like that's like the granddaddy company of United, right?
That's the granddaddy.
Yeah, the granddaddy.
Star Alliance.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a company, right? It's just a partnership.
I think so.
Maybe it's a company. But
honestly, that's another one of those things I feel like I've looked up before, but I don't even know how it's structured and how it's organized.
Right.
But there's quite a few. I feel like there's probably 15 or 20 partners within that alliance. Wow. I don't know. I've looked at it.
What does that
before.
even mean to the customer, though?
I think for the customer, that means like you could book a flight through the United website or the United app, and you, even if it was on one of those other partners, you could still you could book it all the way through instead of going to the other carrier.
And you could probably use your points or
there's so many things.
Tell us. I think you found something.
Yeah, so you can so for Star Alliance, first off, they have lounges all around the world, right? So when you're flying certain classes or you have certain status with a partner, then you can go to those lounges. Like when you have United Gold status, that status can be used on any other partner. So if a partner has a lounge in an airport, it doesn't have to be a Star Alliance, then you can go to their lounge because you have gold. But you're still tied to like United's access, right? But then it's like they have all the code sharing for their flights, so you can either transfer your miles from one partner to another.
Oh, you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
or you can do you can actually book pretty much any of the partners through United's portal. So I can go on and use my points. Like we're going to Patagonia and we're actually flying the entire way there on Copa Airlines.
Okay. Yeah. I remember you guys saying that.
Yeah. So they just have like one plane that goes to Panama City, and then from there a bunch of flights that go out.
Such an interesting route to get down there.
Yeah, it is. So we booked using our points, and it's really nice that they have those partnerships because some of them, their point values will be different, right? So what you can do is say like, Lufthansa has like a really good point value between here and Munich. So I can transfer my points to Lufthansa and then book it there to get like a business class flight with less points than it would have taken on United.
Yeah, it's like the hotels are kind of structured the same way. Like there's IHG hotels,
right? True.
And then there's like the Marriott. I can't remember the name of the Marriott.
Bonvoy.
Bonvoy, yeah.
Right?
Marriott
Bonvoy, yeah.
As of 2024, Star Alliance is the world's largest airline alliance by market share.
Let's go, baby.
With only 17.4% of the market share, though.
Interesting.
So many airlines.
There's so many.
They were also the first. The first global.
Global, yeah. That's kind of a big deal. They formed in 1997. and they have 25 members,
Okay.
airline members.
I was under.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's sweet. But the real question is, who's your favorite airline?
Who's my favorite? United. But that's
That was
because
an easy answer.
that's because I'm based in.
You
I'm
can't
based
just
in
say
Denver.
it because he's a pilot.
I'm based in Denver, and
If it's Allegiant, that's fine. I'm gonna judge you.
Here, baby, let's go.
That's so
Hey,
funny.
you know what's funny? Since you brought that up, this is another thing. When I started, so I didn't talk much about ExoJet, but it was great until it wasn't. Management took over, which is what typically ruins a lot of companies.
Yeah.
And when I finally decided I was out, like the airlines were hiring like gangbusters. I was like, this is crazy that like the company's falling apart. ExoJet was falling apart at that time because like nobody was stuck, which was great. So I was like, I don't know where I'm going to go, but I just started kind of pumping out resumes or applications, I should say. And I applied to Delta. Didn't have any interest in that, but I just wanted to keep my door open. United, never applied to American, wasn't interested.
Yeah.
Also wasn't interested in Frontier, but I did apply there. And then there was another company called Atlas Air, which is a cargo company. And I just knew some people there, and that was really the only reason I applied. Plus they operated the 747, which not a lot of people do anymore because it's kind of old, but it's like the queen of the skies. So I was like, if I got in, that'd be kind of cool. I actually got hired and had a class date with Atlas, but I put it off until I heard back from United and Delta. I was trying to get to United once I decided Airlines. Atlas offered me a class, and I was like, hey, I can't make it that date. Can you push my class date back? And they weren't too happy about it, but they did. And they were going to put me on the 767. And I was like, damn, that's really like, I was only coming here to try to get on the 74 if I was going to come. Global operation, really cool, but they can work you 21 days in a row. And I wasn't down with that.
Oh.
Yeah. And I've talked to guys where it does happen. So I was like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like you literally could circle the globe on a rotation, and they will call you and be like, oh yeah, sorry, you're on day, you're at week 2. And they're like, oh, sorry, you've been reassigned.
Oof.
And they'll give you the minimum rest requirement, and then you just keep going. So I was like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, that sucks.
that's crazy.
But, Frontier. So I don't know why guys that I fly with now are like surprised or think it's funny, but I actually was declined by Frontier.
That's hilarious.
But I got interview practice out of it. So
Not good enough for Frontier.
but I was bad enough for United. So here we go.
I like United for a couple different reasons, but mostly because they've always sort of been there when other airlines failed to meet the challenge of not canceling their flights, and United's always been like, well, we have a flight. I'm like, cool.
And they haven't booted you from a plane
They haven't
yet?
booted me from flights. Like Frontier has basically threatened, not because of attitude, but because they always overbook their flights. For some, I don't know what it is. I've witnessed now several flights where they're just like, yeah, you had a seat, you paid for a seat, now you're not on this flight. Sorry.
I feel
It's a
like
little bit of a
Frontier,
surprise, huh?
Frontier
Wrenching
is
your
like
travel plans.
Yeah.
they either have almost nobody on their planes or they're completely full. There's like no in between. I don't know. I think maybe what they do is they have the ones that aren't full, and then they're like, well, we're not gonna do that anymore, so they get rid of that.
Yeah.
And then the other flights are just now overfilled.
And United has such a big market share in Denver that it's just wildly convenient to be a big fan of them, and then you get the points, and and I don't like Southwest because I just don't like the seating thing. I know they're changing that. They also don't have like a business class or a first. Do they have a first class in Southwest? I don't
Less
think so.
options.
Yeah. So
because they're a budget airline, they're considered one.
Yeah, because I guess the
started
difference,
as one.
right, is if you have a first class and don't, that's what delineates you from a budget airline.
I think so.
I think that's what.
There's probably
I read.
more to it than
Yeah.
I'm aware of, but
Yeah.
I'm sure that's part of it.
But yeah, I like them. I like Delta probably second, just because it's a nice ride.
They're the two top dogs, man.
Yeah,
I get it.
I don't like. Like I said, I don't like Southwest. I really don't like American. They feel
understandable.
They feel like the Walmart of
Yeah, totally.
airlines, right?
I haven't heard that before, but
they're massive. I think their quality is just, I don't know, is kind of like
seems like it's going down.
Yeah, British Airlines is kind of like my comparison to American. Like I feel like I've flown both, and I'm like, yeah, this feels like American flight, but and they're always delayed for some reason. I don't know. That's just my experience. I know every airline has its problems with like delays and cancellations. In fact, I got canceled on a Spirit flight once. I was going to Vegas.
I'm really shocked.
Yeah, right. And thank God that they moved out of Denver, because it was so tempting to buy like the $39 flight on Spirit. And you're like, I could do it.
Well, it's funny. Marissa's friends are coming out on the 14th, and I said, hey, can you send me, just so I was up to speed with everything else, can you send me their confirmation so I just know when they get here? And she's like, yeah, I think they're, I don't know what she said they were on, but it turns out they're on Allegiant. And I was like, I don't know if they're going to show up.
But it's gone.
But like you said, the reality is it's just like you have the infrastructure and you have the fleet size to like swap things out. If something like, some of the smaller airlines, they just don't have that capacity.
Yeah. And that's a shame, because it really does make or break your experience. And Spirit, for a lot of the times, and they were also kind of shady. And Frontier's very shady, and a lot of their like operations, business, and purchasing practices, but Spirit wasn't canceling or delaying their flights because of weather. A lot of the time it was because the staff. It was just a staffing problem, and that's on the management and the company as a whole to figure that out and really fix that. And so I just something I haven't seen necessarily from the bigger airlines, but they struggled a lot with that. So I got canceled on Spirit, and I go over to United, and I'm like, thank God you have a flight to Vegas in like 20 minutes. And the lady was like, I was like, and I was trashing Spirit. I'm like, Spirit's so bad. And she was like, well, United's not perfect either. Like, she was like totally
just keeping it real.
She's like, yeah, she's keeping it real with me. She's like, well, you're eventually going to run into an issue with United too, because the reality of the situation is the industry as a whole is susceptible to delays and cancellations, and sometimes it's out of your control.
Some are worse.
And I was actually going to piggyback on that real quick, because I feel like it's worth mentioning is, from a United perspective, I'm glad that the company I work for has that ability, and people do like it. On the flip side, from an aviator's perspective, it's nice. It's not nice to see that like other pilots are struggling because their companies are struggling. Fortunately, they have the opportunity to relocate, but a lot of people choose where they work based on where they can be based, because that's close to where they live. So when things do start to fall apart elsewhere, it's like, I'm glad like if we can open our arms and they can come in, so to speak. But yeah, that's the nature of the beast.
It blows my mind the amount of coordination that the airline industry is involved in, and just making sure shit goes right every single day. There's thousands of flights, and Denver alone is quickly going to hit 100 million enplanements in the next couple of years. That's like the trajectory.
I fly the airplane. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah,
so many.
That's so many people, and the fact that there's not more cancellations and delays is wildly impressive. And you just have to take a moment when your flight gets delayed to just remember how crazy and how intense the system is, and how effective it is the majority of the time. I mean,
yeah, it really is some kind of miracle, because from my perspective, and you can see it if you're sitting at the window seat, but it's like, even when before a flight, I go down and do a pre-flight inspection, walk around, make sure everything on the outside of the airplane looks good, and just how many ground vehicles are involved in getting that plane off the gate. It's like some people have no idea. Like they walk down the aisle, they put their bag up, sit down, and they're just doing whatever. And I mean, we all do it probably when we're passengers, but like when you're walking around the airplane and you realize, I mean, there's a fuel truck out there, there's a catering truck, there's luggage carts, there's a lav, there's somebody dumping the lav so that it's not full for the next flight. I mean, there's so much crap going on. And then it's like, sometimes I'm amazed, like if somebody does a pre-order for their meal in business class, like I don't know how many gates, like in one concourse at Denver, there's like 80 gates probably. Like, how does that not get screwed up more often?
It's crazy.
It's insane.
It does get screwed up sometimes.
It does.
Like, how does it not?
Because in economy, you can pre-order too, diet based, and like sometimes they won't bring it to you, or they'll bring it to you, but it'll be like, oh, were you vegan or whatever. So.
Yeah, but the amount of time you have from when they land to where they need to like restock the plane, and still take off on time. It has to be a well-oiled machine. Yeah, it's so impressive. I don't know how they keep doing it, and people. I don't know.
What people also don't realize is, like, I would say on average, our planes are at the gate for about an hour and a half. Sometimes it's an hour.
Yeah.
if the plane is due for regular maintenance, then they'll block it off to be sitting at the gate for 10, 12, however many hours they need. But like the international ones, like that flight will go literally, like when I flew to Tokyo, we'll get a message that tells us how long the plane's going to be there before it turns around. That plane's on the ground for like 2 hours and it just turns around and flies 12 more hours again, like constantly, just back and forth.
Yeah.
It's insane. But the planes start to fall apart if they don't, not really, but like if it's not getting used, it's going to take more maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds counterintuitive probably. But.
It does. Yeah. It's kind of, it's backwards thinking, but that makes sense. They're designed and engineered to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Not sit on the tarmac for months or weeks or whatever, but yeah, they're turning and burning. It's impressive.
Oh, I forgot to say this earlier. This was delicious. Whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah. I forgot to tell people what it is. So we made a
It's a limoncello.
It's got mezcal, but it is a So it is a mezcal
Aperol spritz.
But it is specifically called a
White Russian.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's a White Russian. No, it's called a mezcal lime Ricky, which I love the name, by the way. Anything with
where'd
Ricky
that come from?
I don't know. I don't know, but it is made with 2 ounces of mezcal, 1 ounce of fresh lime juice, club soda, and simple syrup. So it's a very simple cocktail to make. It's not overly complicated.
Simple.
You don't need to ferment anything. You just need your mezcal.
Where do you get the recipes?
Oh, really? It's based on like either what I have at the bar, which is quite a bit of things, but
it's a nice selection.
Yeah, I for this particular, I got mezcal. This is mezcal you can't get in the United States. It was brought to me by a good friend who I work with.
Illegal mezcal.
Who works
smuggling.
Who lives also, has dual citizenship, but he lives in Mexico, also works here. But he goes back very frequently. Yeah. So he brought it from like a random village in Mexico. And
Did he pay the
like,
tariff?
A village.
I don't want to rat him. I don't want to rat him out.
Does it matter?
But it's like true authentic like mezcal. And it was pretty good. Like I like it so far. And yeah, he knows I'm on a tequila mezcal kick, so he brought me back a bottle.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's pretty tasty.
We were just in we were talking about French Polynesia a second ago, and honestly, sounds kind of silly, but I didn't actually know the process to make rum. Like it's a pretty popular thing out there. So we bought some from this local place, and we just showed up, and they kind of showed us around a little bit. And I was like, so this has something to do with sugar cane, right? And she's like, it has everything to do with sugar cane. Mm-hmm. And you could actually smell it. They were growing it like behind the building. There was a sugar cane. I don't know what you want to call it. It's not like a plantation. I don't know what it's called. A sugar cane field, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so, right? Yeah.
But she showed us like the center part, like basically the stalk, which looked really hard. And she's like, yeah, we literally just compress this and get juice out of it. I'm like, what?
So cool.
Juice out of a stalk, and then they just ferment it. And I'm like,
we saw that in Madeira. We went to something probably really similar. Yeah. They had the machines going. And this guy's just like smoking cigarettes, and they're just like stuck in sticking the stalks in, and it's like a gear that just crushes them, and the juice comes out, and they like throw them back in, and
wow,
it was good though.
Strange,
but
so. We've asked you a lot of questions. We really appreciate all the knowledge. I got to ask to go out on the episode on what is your craziest, annoying, rowdy passenger story that you've ever done? Like, because like you always hear about the like don't make me get the pilot. I will get the pilot. So have you ever had to like interfere with a rowdy asshole on board, and what was that like?
Interfere? No, because I have 3 bars on my shoulder.
You're the last wall to go down.
I don't get paid enough for that. I do actually have one story that happened at United and one that was during charter. The one at United, it was really shocking that like this particular individual was causing the problem. I guess maybe when I tell you the story it won't be. But so it was a red eye. I think I don't know, Denver to Boston, or it doesn't matter where it was, but it was late. So, people are in a certain mood about that already probably. And the airplane ended up having some maintenance issue. So basically the flight was delayed by like 3 hours. It was kind of pushing up on, it got delayed even further because all the crew have different, rest periods or like duty limits based on when they started. So like I said earlier, the flight attendants change pretty much every flight. So they might have started their day earlier than we did. In that case, they did. So they dutied out when that delay happened. they ran out of duty time before we did. So then now they have to call flight attendants in that are on reserve, and they came from standby. I don't know what their rules are, but I think they have like, some of them have like 30 minutes to report. Some of them have like 2 hours. So now you got to wait for them to show up. So that pushed the delay back after the maintenance issue, pushed the departure back. And what ended up happening is maintenance determined that we were just going to leave the airplane at the gate. They were going to take that plane in maintenance. We said, hey, find us a different airplane, which again goes back to the capacity thing. It's nice that we have that ability. We're sitting in Denver. We had planes sitting at the gates. So that's what we did. We moved everybody to a different gate. So by then, it's 3 hours later, fatigue setting in for us. I'm still feeling safe, or I wouldn't have taken the trip. I have the ability to just call schedule. I'm like, look, I'm fatigued. I'm not going. Mm-hmm. And what happens at that point, if they have to cancel it because they can't find another crew, that's not my problem anymore. It's a safety thing at that point. Like, I don't feel safe. But anyway, that's a side note. So we get everybody over there, and one of the passengers that was originally on the flight was making a big fuss about stowing her bag in the by her feet, like her carry-on bag. They say, make room. And it was a full flight still, actually, even though it was that late. She was making a big deal out of putting her bag by her feet instead of in the overhead, because she didn't want her book bag by her feet or whatever she had. I don't even know. But it was a full flight, so they needed the overhead space. But she was like, the flight attendants told her like twice, hey, ma'am, we need you to put your bag up by your feet. And she's like, I'm not doing that. And then I think at some point she said something to them along the lines of, don't you know who I am?
Oh.
She wasn't in first class. She was like halfway back, by the way. Which to me, like, if if you're
gonna pull that card,
yeah,
you're sitting in economy.
Come on. So meanwhile, we're up front getting a new airplane ready, getting the flight plan ready, and this coordination is happening, and it's during boarding. So there's a lot going on, and finally, this lady, I guess, had some vulgarities toward the flight attendant, and she was telling us, and I was like, okay. And basically, the captain at that point said, she's not coming with us. I don't care what she says. She's getting off the airplane. We're not pushing back until she's off the plane. And the captain has full authority to do that. If there's somebody that legitimately is causing an issue, whether they're intoxicated or, aggressive or whatever, they're going to be removed. We don't need them becoming a problem in the air. So they said, okay. So we have customer service people that'll come down because they're educated in the ways of like the legalities of what you can say and do without causing this person to legally sue the company. And flight attendants aren't really trained on that. So we brought a customer service rep down, and they said it got, there were, I didn't hear it from the cockpit, but it got loud, I guess. And this person was still like, I'm not getting off. And they're creating a disturbance around him. Everybody else is probably some people are probably a little nervous or whatever. And finally, the customer service person just grabbed her bag and took it off. And she finally stormed out, and then she stopped at the front, by the front galley where the flight attendants were standing, and yelled at them and said something rude to them. And meanwhile, while all this is going on, duty time is ticking away. Like we finally got to the point, literally, and it literally gets this specific because it's a legality thing from the FAA. If the door wasn't shut in like 90 seconds, that flight was dead in the water.
Oh my God.
All those people were screwed.
Wow.
And they would have probably canceled the flight because we were so far delayed already and the crew was already going to time out. So that was a fiasco. But literally, like, the customer service was like, get off the airplane, like yelling at this person because they knew that we were in a time crunch too. And literally, for the flight attendants, that's when the doors close. That's when like the duty time. That's how the duty time is rigged or whatever. Mm-hmm. So as long as the door is shut, we're good. So literally, like, the person like kind of storms off and the door just slams right behind their fucking heels, dude. Yeah. So that was a little rowdy. That was probably my most rowdy moment at United.
Did you ever find out who this was? Was it Martha Stewart?
Supposedly.
Ooh. Good guess, yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Did she fly on United?
Yeah, she lost all her money when she went to prison, right? So.
Yeah,
she can't afford it.
No.
It was supposedly some diplomat.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
Which I'm still surprised. Like,
it was like a Bulgarian diplomat,
Yeah.
It's like,
I wish I remember where they said they were from. But actually, my point with like talking about the bar thing was because finally, when the captain is the last person to go back and say anything.
Yeah.
But they basically went back and he went back. There's a document we have, and he went back and essentially read the customer their Miranda rights. Like, you are like committing by disrupting the flight, Like you can say they're disrupting the departure of a flight. Like that's like, I don't know if that was a felony or pretty close, but it's like a $25,000 fine or something. And you can be charged for that.
And banned, right?
Banned, yeah.
So do they have to get like law enforcement on the plane? If like somebody says, I'm not leaving,
They
you're
would
going to
have.
have
That would have been
pull
the
me
next
off?
step.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So the cops would have to come on and basically pull them off.
I think
the
there
flight.
was a cop that was standing by, like inside the jet bridge, in case, but they try not to intervene if they don't have to.
Right,
But that would have been the next step.
Because that maybe like instigates it a little bit.
Well, yeah,
Exactly.
it escalates things, yeah, for sure. And people start to get a little
I feel
bit
like
more
I've
nervous.
seen a couple of the videos online where it's something like this, where
Somebody's on
because
Twitter.
someone won't get off, now the flight's canceled or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just can't imagine would the horde just like kill the person after, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think they're
just get out the fucking plane.
I think there'd be at least one person that would, some dude or somebody would stand up and say something.
Right.
Yeah.
The other one was kind of funny, honestly. It was coming out. It was a charter trip, and I'll make this short as I can. But we were coming out of Vegas. I flew this guy from Cleveland back and forth to Vegas quite a few times, and he was, part party and part business, supposedly. But we're leaving Vegas on the last day of this weekend trip at like 8 a.m. Side note: this guy, it's kind of funny. This guy he had like 6 of his buddies or coworkers, or maybe they were both, out there for some convention with him, and they were all at the airport ready to go. And everyone's like, "Where's Ron?" And we don't know. We haven't heard from him. Well, Ron was about an hour late, and when he got there, he finally pulled up in a limo, and there was like a hooker or something in the limo.
Oh man.
But so finally everything's good to go. We shut the door, we take off, and like, I don't know, 10 minutes into the flight, I sort of like feel the plane kind of like rocking.
Nice.
And I was like, and on the Challenger, this is a bunch of dudes, by the way. On the Challenger, the charter jet, there's no door. Like I can turn around and see everybody. And I just felt it like rocking a little bit. I was like, what the hell is going on? And then right after that, I heard shots.
Nice.
It's like 8:30 in the morning.
Oh my god!
And one of Ron's buddies, he was a big dude. He was probably like 350 pounds, just tall guy, is just like jumping in the back of the airplane, ready to do some shots. He wasn't causing a disturbance to us. They're on a private jet and having fun.
That's the way it goes.
But it was funny.
That's awesome. I thought you were gonna go with like somebody was like having sex in the back of the plane. And
That's happened.
Well,
That wasn't a disturbance.
Yeah. Well, you know. Yeah.
You're chartering an airplane.
If
I was chartering an airplane, I mean,
Yeah.
Isn't there in Vegas? There's that plane you can
the Flamingo flights.
Is that what they call
Well,
them?
that's one of them.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
That's what it's for. Like there's a
Yeah.
curtain and stuff.
There's a curtain, and there's like a little bed thing. Yeah.
So get it on.
Mile High Club,
That's right.
you know?
Comes from somewhere.
It's a lot higher than the Mile High Club, you know?
You think they changed the sheets?
No.
It's like part of the experience, right?
Yeah, it's part of the experience.
Yeah.
It's all crusty and dusty.
It's like
right
if
there.
you were to do this in a normal plane, like they wouldn't clean the bathroom, right?
Of course not. You see how much time is in between the flights?
Why is the toilet sucking so hard when I press the toilet flush? Why is it doing that?
What if it didn't?
Ooh.
What if your turd stayed in there?
Ugh.
It's gravity. It's gonna go down.
Yeah, where-
No, that's what.
Where
it's
does the
just
suck
pressure.
go though? Where does it go?
Why is it sucking so
Where's
hard?
it sucking to?
Why is it scary?
Is it going out the
onto
plane?
whatever's below you, man.
Every time I press the button, I have to
No.
go like this because it's like disturbingly loud.
This is Chase.
It scares me.
Yeah, that scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
But part of the trick is you put the lid down first, then it's not as loud.
You got to do
Yeah,
that.
then you don't get
Yeah.
the backsplash.
you got backsplash.
If you get into backsplash, you should probably
you're doing it wrong. You're doing it a lot
you should
wrong.
report that.
Yeah, should be no backsplash.
Yeah.
Awkward.
Yeah, that's always scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, toilets on planes are weird.
Yeah,
You know, fun fact, I saw this
But at least
on,
they're there.
TikTok.
at least they're there.
That's true. Otherwise, I'd pee my pants. I saw that plane bathrooms have a little place to put your cigarette
Don't do it. Don't think about it.
because the
Old
reason
school.
he said it is because he said that people will still do it, and if they do, they need a safe place to be able to put out their cigarette.
That's true. There are smoke detectors in the bathrooms. You know, the whole thing. They say not to be tampered with. But
Yeah,
And then he tried to open it.
if you're lighting
and had
up
hard
a
time.
cigarette on an airplane these days, That's a bold move.
That's a bold move. Also, why are they still got the little icon with the no cigarette?
Regulations,
icon?
baby. Can't get rid of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it's just a holdover reg.
I'm like, this is a new plane. Why you got that? Like, we all know we can't do that.
It's somewhere in a book that says it has to be there.
There's so many weird regulations that differ around the world too. Like in some countries, you have to turn your phone off. Like you can't go on airplane mode. It has to be turned off.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have a country in mind?
I want to say it was maybe China or Thailand.
That makes sense.
It was one.
I mean,
of
it doesn't,
two,
but
I think, because I think it was that trip.
Yeah. If you're from the United States, cell phone off. Everybody else, You're from Taiwan, cell phone off too. Yeah, airplane mode. Is it still necessary? What are we doing here? It's 2025. Are we still putting the thing on the airplane mode?
You remember the whole 5G thing that came out, right?
Yeah.
Ooh.
So those did put off that was actually some kind of interference. That did put off a pretty strong signal, and if it was near airports, there was a piece of instrumentation that it could affect because it was such a strong signal.
So when you looked at the dash, it kind of just like glitched a little bit. It was like
Exactly.
When I first started flying, I thought somebody would come back and be like, somebody back here has not put their cell phone on airplane mode.
They have their spectrometer on.
Yeah, exactly. Get him. But like, is it really like? Do you still have to do it?
Before that, have you ever been like sitting next to someone when you're on your phone and you're like taxiing and they seem uneasy that you're on your phone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Because I'll be the first to admit I don't put my phone on airplane mode.
I do primarily because I think that your phone is just trying to connect to a cell tower and it's probably going to like drain your battery or something.
Yeah, that's good.
I do it on international flights.
If you had,
because moreover,
if you had what?
You're like, I'm not taking any chances.
Yeah.
There's like over water.
There's less landing places.
There's rafts, Miles. It's fine.
Yeah.
Don't you know how to swim?
Well, the last couple of planes that landed in the ocean didn't do very well.
It's pretty cold.
Yeah.
Pretty cold.
That's true. You're onto something. Anyway, what would happen if 180 people were trying to transmit cell phone signals? I don't know. Would it have some interference? I mean, it's radio signals that we have up there, a lot of them. So is there a chance that it could interfere? Maybe. Do I experience that on a daily basis? I don't think I've ever have. So
yeah.
I don't know if there's a real direct correlation between cell phone signals and radio interference.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it's not just the radios we communicate with. There's so many other communication pieces of equipment up there that I guess they could be worried about.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now they have Wi-Fi in planes too, so it gets complicated. I'm like, I can connect to your Wi-Fi signal, but I can't have my own I have to put it in airplane mode. What are we doing?
But Starlink is coming.
Starlink is coming. Yeah. Is that so? That's like the next evolution of network connectivity on United flights, right?
It's going to be free, right?
Better yet, they say it's going to be free.
Good, because I'm sick of spending $8 per flight.
I know.
It's like 1 hour flight, 6 hour flight, $8. International flight, it's like $23.
I hear you.
It's crazy.
I just use the points every time.
I heard everybody saying like Delta. They're like Delta has free Wi-Fi, and then I heard somebody else say, well, it doesn't really work that good. I have no idea. I've never.
Now it does. I don't know if it did in the past. Yeah, because they switched. They switched it at some point, and it was you could stream. You could stream
that's
Netflix.
nice.
Yeah.
Which I think you'll be able to do on United once they get Starlink.
For sure. It's impressive that you can, I don't know, you're going like, 500 miles
600.
an hour. Yeah, and you can still get a signal.
Why isn't the Wi-Fi working?
Yeah.
I don't know.
The amount of times I've
I'm not
heard
Miles.
Can you turn it off and on again?
Yeah.
I talk about stuff like this sometimes. I'm like, yeah, my buddy's a software engineer, and he probably could figure this out. I don't know if that's true.
Do you have a button that toggles the Wi-Fi and you just do it to annoy passengers? Like, I'm having a shit day. Nobody gets Wi-Fi.
Well, the problem is I also use the Wi-Fi, so I don't turn it off.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I use it for apps that are related to my work. Practices.
TikTok. We know it's TikTok. Come
Yes.
on. Pilot TikTok's
Right.
very popular.
You're not allowed to anymore.
Oh, yeah, true.
Guys, we could probably talk about stuff for hours.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's the case with a lot of guests.
We
but
could.
Maybe I'll come back.
Yeah.
It'd be cool.
Thanks
Talk about
for
something other than flying.
Yeah, yes.
Well-
You're a cool dude. We definitely want to chat other than what you deal with on a weekly basis, flying, all that. And yeah, we appreciate you coming on and spending time with us and talking shop. This is really interesting. I have a million more questions, but I don't want to keep you more than we have to.
For that, ladies and gentlemen, the next 7 podcasts are going to be with Brett.
We're gonna break
doing
this
a
up.
flight series.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to do that. Your audience would be very bored. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I was talking to the guy I was flying with today. I'm like, this whole content creation thing, if this thing can really turn into something, I'm like, I'm going to be taking more time off work. I love to fly, but I mean, it pays the bills.
Yeah.
I was always like, flying an airplane is fun, but like flying airlines is different. It's like, if I could buy a small airplane and zip around and have, be a little crazier.
Yeah.
Like some kind of aerobatics or something. That sounds fun to me.
Not have to report to the man.
Plus we keep, which honestly I don't like. Have I ever seen my boss since I started at United? No, I haven't. I don't go to an office. There's a lot of good things. So I'm not complaining, even though I am kind of, because everybody says that's what pilots do best. But I never go into an office.
Yeah.
I drive to work. I do my job. I get paid to go eat in some random place and check it out and then come home. And then I don't have to report to anyone. So it is nice, but.
So you hear that, kids? That's his word of advice. Become a pilot.
Do it. You heard it here first. Yeah, that's the only reason. No boss. Thank you, Brett. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
guys.
This was fun.
Yes, absolutely.
For those of you still listening, appreciate. Give us a follow. Like us on Instagram. Go to YouTube, Spotify, all that good stuff. Leave us a review. That's how other people find the show. And until next time, adios.
Go to bed.